Dr. Nalini Kokram on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business, I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand for forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two.
Why? You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
let's go to the last part.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say, we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year.
Early this year.
Oh gosh. Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust. Prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
WESN. Hello there, and a very happy new year. Thank you very much for joining us for this special edition of AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. It's been 1 week since our last discussion. My colleague Sean Michael Small and I, we had some time off, but during such time, uh, quite an announcement was made on the part of the Prime Minister, which we will get into shortly. But welcome back to AM Prime, and thank you very much for joining us. We hope that your new year started well, all things considered, and may 2025 be a great year. We shall make it a great year. I'm joined this morning, as I mentioned, a special edition of AM Prime once more by my colleague Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean, and welcome back to the program. It's good to see you.
You know, there's some amount of irony that we're going with AM Prime. I'm not encouraged on AM Prime. I mean, here comes Keaton padding his stats, and it is what it is. But it's fine. It's fine. We'll do your show. We'll do your show. Don't mind that we have a perfectly good show for this sort of content, and you're already on the credits for that show. But we'll do the show where I'll go uncredited with my special guest appearance once again, aka Talking Prime. That's right. Talking Prime is back, folks. I actually did not think we would be doing this again so soon, and yet here we are, because while what the Prime Minister said did not necessarily take me by surprise, maybe the timing of it might have been a bit surprising for me.
Well, first of all, I think I've made enough guest appearances on Talking Points in the previous year for you
No,
to
in the
make a few
credits,
this year.
it's not a guest appearance.
No worries
It's not
at
a
all, my
guest
friend.
appearance.
We'll work on that. We'll work on that. We will ensure that your name is highlighted at the end of the program. But back to what the Prime Minister said actually on Friday at his press conference. You are correct in what you said. It is my opinion as well that his announcement was not necessarily surprising at all. However, it was the timing. I was expecting his media briefing to solely focus on the state of emergency and justify the government's position as it relates to the need of a state of emergency and other elements along with it, such as not having a curfew. So when the press conference lasted for about an hour and 25, an hour and 30 minutes, give or take. And the last 10 minutes of that press conference dominated really all the stories, all the headlines coming out of his briefing on Friday. Sean, what was your initial reaction?
My initial, well, okay, here's what I was surprised about. Because I listened to the press conference, and generally speaking, once we got about halfway through the journalist questions, and I think they switched the topic. I can't remember exactly, but I figured, look, I've heard what I need to hear with regards to the state of emergency. I can't even remember what my first impressions were. But I was trying to think, all right, this is what I'll potentially want to say about it. Ultimately, what he said, he was defensive in some ways, and there were some things I didn't like, but ultimately it was the case of, like, it was what it was. Some of his phrasings, like, there was some communication stuff that I didn't like, but at the end of the day, there wasn't anything to say, oh my gosh, what are they doing? Kind of sorry. He was more like reiterating, if my memory serves correct. The irony, of course, is it's difficult to remember what I want to say about that, because you had to call me to let me know, hey, it's actually 7 minutes approximately. 7 minutes, right? And this is not something that Dr. Keith Rowley usually does. He usually gives all his commentary up front, and the question part is just answer questions. So he decided the last 7 minutes, I'm going to kind of, in a way, it's not a full retirement speech, but it's one of those that it kind of is, in a sense. Like, this is the, I guess you could say, the first official word of his stance on the matter, where he said it in no uncertain terms. And I guess, he took his time with it. I did not see it coming when I stopped watching the press conference, I'll admit, because again, I was concentrating on the state of emergency stuff. But then it does make sense. I will say this, I did not expect him to do this, given what we've heard behind the scenes with the internal politics. And I prefer that he did it this way, because the implications of what could have potentially have been done based on what we know that's in the public sphere, which is very limited and has certain speculations on it. I didn't necessarily like it. The implication with both parties that the current political leaders are going to go into the next election, we're going to vote for them, and then they're going to potentially have a change like the next year of political leader for both parties. We're not voting for the prime minister then, really. We're voting for the party, and that would have been a step backwards to me. The prime minister doing this, for whatever reason, and we could maybe speculate on that later, at the very least, the first thing I thought about was, this is the right way to do it. Let the next person lead the party in the election. Let them win on their merits, because that's the person who's going to be running the country for approximately 4.5 to 5 years, give or take, as opposed to trying to proxy somebody in through the back door, all of the speculations and complaints that we heard. And to some extent, politically, this might be a very brilliant move because it puts that to bed. But then now, where does it leave the PNM? It has certain challenges that, as far as we know, have not been addressed.
Well, there will be continued analysis throughout the course of this morning's edition of AM Prime, and we will open up the phone lines for an extended period following analysis and guest appearances on the program this morning. But Sean, to add to what you indicated, interestingly, I spoke to a number of individuals prior to the press conference who indicated that they had no interest in viewing because they were of the opinion it was going to be the Prime Minister's justification of the state of emergency and the government's position in doing such. And I encouraged them to watch the media briefing nevertheless. So I think this really took everyone a bit by surprise. Now, in all fairness to the Prime Minister, he indicated at 2020, and I do remember this at Balazzi House during the period, that he will not be doing this again as political leader, and he will not be leading in the next general election. Throughout the latter half of last year, he started giving hints, such as the now infamous speech, one can say, in Parliament about a swan song. But on the face of it, he has more or less stuck to his word in respect to that case. I think it's a brilliant move. Politically, first of all, it is a brilliant move what he's done. He's always been an excellent strategist, but his timing, one can argue, is quite astounding. As you said, it was not necessarily expected in relation to the timing, but the speech itself was not at all surprising. I think it's a brilliant move politically because not only does it allow for a refreshed people's national movement, depending on how things go from this point, leading into a general election, it's dependent on a number of factors, but it allows for a refreshed people's national movement, which I say could be a dangerous thing for other political institutions, of which we'll get into later on. But to add to that, it also is quite a mature move and shows how mature the Prime Minister is in respect to his leadership. Now, we may not necessarily agree on his policies. We may have constant debates as it relates to whether or not he has been a good Prime Minister, exactly what his legacy is, what he leaves behind when he exits office. There will be conversations about that. But in relation to leadership, it is quite mature that he has taken this position in the sense that part of it is understanding, I know when my time is up, I know when I am spent, I know when there is need for change, and therefore I'm going to allow room for such. And there will be speculation, as you mentioned, as per the exact reasons why he has exited office. But as I mentioned, it does not change tune from what he initially indicated in 2020 at Balazzi House. And to add to that, it's quite mature. It has, to a certain degree, probably altered the dynamics of a general election and really started a general election year on quite an interesting point of view.
Well, the thing is, we don't know what the effect it will have on the general until we know who's going to replace it. Both to a lesser degree Digger Martin East, but also who's going to be the next political leader. And
Digger Martin West.
Digger Martin West, sorry. And therein lies the problem. Therein lies the rub. You say that this could refresh the PNM. Now, the speculation was, the rumors, the scuttlebutt was that he didn't necessarily commit beyond saying it's my swan song and hinting to the fact because of all of the rumors circulating around wanting to have Stuart Young as the next prime minister, as the successor, and then to a lesser extent, Amory Brown as the successor for Digger Martin West. To some extent, you know, we didn't necessarily get a lot of answers. This is probably the first thing that kind of puts all of that to bed. Doesn't necessarily mean that the speculation was wrong, but one of the things that makes this a very brilliant political move is it kind of makes all that a moot point. The problem is it still leaves the window open because even before this year or last year, I think maybe a couple of years ago, I don't know if you share, I can't remember if you shared this sentiment with me, but we've spoken about this before. Dr. Keith Rowley, at the end of the day, I always say, you know, maybe you want to say that I grade him on a curve, but he is a better candidate than for prime minister than a significant amount of the politicians in parliament. And when he's gone, he keeps the PNM together. We know that they have a lot of different people with ambitions. Now that he's gone, potentially, if this is not managed properly, it could fracture the party because to some extent, there are cracks in the discipline. We don't know how far those go, to be fair to them. And to some extent, maybe he's already done things behind the scenes to make sure that that does not happen. They're having their kumbaya moment in Tobago. Everything is looking good for now. And perhaps he could convince enough people to rally behind a consensus pick so that they don't have... Competition is good. Democratic process is good. But you don't necessarily want the situation to devolve where you have like more than two factions, definitely, kind of overdoing it, going too far and fracturing the party to the point where it will then, it could go up for the general election, but it'll be a shadow of itself. Why that matters to the rest of us who are not necessarily card-carrying members of the PNM, who are not going to eat the food and all of that jazz that people might want to speculate on. Because the last thing we want is more instability in the political sphere, especially now that the more stable party is going through a transition. That's the kicker, right?
Thing is, you know, one can argue that instability can be seen as a good thing when it comes to political parties and not necessarily cabinets and governments. So internally, whatever happens should be dealt with internally. Now, speaking from previous instances and even what you and I have discussed, People's National Movement has usually been very good when it comes to their internal matters and their public relations following such. So that is one aspect, and I do understand the point where you're coming from, which is why I would say it allows for a refresh. Whether or not that transpires is soon to be seen, but it certainly allows for opportunity in that regard. Of course, it can see the PNM going into a potential leadership crisis, where there may be those fighting for the position. However, as I mentioned, there is always that possibility that this was something that the public knew last. It is perhaps, even though the Prime Minister indicated that, listen, I will inform my colleagues during this cabinet retreat that took place this weekend in Tobago, it is quite possible that we can't be foolish in stating that internally people were not aware. So I think it's interesting times ahead when it comes to the leadership of the People's National Movement and even the dynamic of the People's National Movement. There have already been debates and conversations as per his potential replacement. And yes, you are correct in suggesting that he was perhaps the most mature individual to lead as Prime Minister. But again, give credit where credit is due. He took a PNM that was broken following the 2010 general election, and he was able to transform it. He did bring in a lot of new faces. He did bring in a lot of youth. It's now up to those individuals whom he brought into the party, and of course, other individuals who will be entering the party for the upcoming election, such as Cree Marcel, to decide the direction of the party. But of course, Sean, as I said, there's going to be a lot of debate. There's going to be a lot of analysis. Interesting times ahead, of course. And I, for one, am wondering what is the potential impact on other political parties that are running the course for the next election. Of course, the main opposition at this point is the United National Congress. There have been constant calls from various quarters in previous years for their political leader to step down and give others an opportunity. As I said, on the part of the Prime Minister, it's quite brilliant, and it also shows mature leadership. But again, time will tell as it relates. So there's already been reaction. We've heard the reaction on the part of the opposition leader. We've seen the reaction on the part of the political leader of the NCA, which is quite in contrast to the position of the opposition leader, Kamala Prasad-Bisesa. And we've seen some commentary on the part of Hope and other political institutions such as the Congress of the People. So again, I think this has really allowed for what I will say a very, very exciting general election, at least from an analyst point of view. People in Toronto are frustrated, and this probably adds to the frustration, but it also adds to the excitement.
I mean, in theory, one would think, oh, change is coming to the PNM, hopefully change for the better. My concern is that far too many of the people in politics are ultimately ordinary Joes. They make ordinary mistakes. They don't necessarily have the capacity to be great. And when you're doing something like running a country, even the CEO of a large multinational corporation or a large conglomerate, you need to be great. That's why those types of jobs have heavy turnover. This is not just about, oh, well, you made a mistake and you'll learn better next time. That's not really how these things are supposed to go, which is why giving people a chance in positions such as Commissioner of Police, Chief Justice, et cetera, high office. And the thing is, I would count Dr. Heath Rowley as one of the people who was better at this than his contemporaries. Some of the new people that are coming on both sides have been disappointing. Some of them have been okay. We don't necessarily know how far they could go for some of them. So you know, the jury's still out. But just case in point, you had the opposition leader kind of do the usual, what we would expect in local politics. And then you had the leader of the NTA, ironically, praise the Prime Minister for his mature decision by doing something that I would argue would have been also, he made a mature decision. Let's not, okay, he's retiring. Let's not use this as a moment to get cheap points. You know, let's kind of show that I understand leadership function and communication, which to me, I would argue, and I've said this before, because it's not the first time, Guy Griffith, I think, is doing things that should be basic, low-hanging fruit. Like, this is what you should be doing. This is how you show a certain amount of maturity and grace, just on a basic level, by doing these things, by being responsible, by not turning anything into some kind of bacchanal all the time. And there may be a few others out there in the UNC and the PNM, but I'm just afraid I don't know if we have enough. I don't know if they're necessarily going to rise to the top, because the way our politics goes is not always necessarily based on merit or ability. It's based on who could, you know, do the Potomac two-step better than the others.
Now, in relation to what the Prime Minister said, you probably would have seen that video circulating. There were a number of videos circulating, but one of the wonderful things of having my colleague on the program is that he takes up a lot of duties when it comes to cutting some of these clips from these media briefings for us to see. So, Sean, thank you for that. But we do have the Prime Minister's press conference available now to share with you, particularly the last 6 to 7 minutes where he went into detail as it relates to his future plans. So let us take a look at the Prime Minister's media briefing last Friday.
But there's some things I want to say, because the public, some people have issues, or the public is not very clear on some business that is not in front of them at this time. I think the time has come for them to put some business before the country. address this. I have been on Tobago, as you all know, and this is as good a place as ever for me to have this conversation or make this comment. You would see invariably all my colleagues and myself, we are relentless attack from particular people. Many of them never plant a okra seed in this country, never sweep a foot of pavement, never plant a tree, but they're relentlessly attacking people who work in public life and who contribute to national development. And they do it with hate and vitriol. Unfortunately, that's what it is. But for me, it wasn't always so. It wasn't always so. I could see a deterioration in the quality of our society, fueled by the availability of the mechanism to spread your bile, absence of certain kinds of civilities, and of course, more me than us. So at this time in my life, I want to say that I've been in Tobago. My first job here on a payroll was to plant grass at Hope Estate. And that was on public payroll, I mean, because I was in the juicy factory before, putting bottles in cases. But on the public payroll, I was there planting grass at Hope Estate when we moved the estate from Scarborough to Hope. I've seen the country progress. Okay, that time I got $7 a day. The same person now probably is a millionaire. But after that, I taught school in Tobago. And then I entered the political arena in 1980. This year would be 45 years that I've been in public life in Trinidad and Tobago. I've offered myself for service in Tobago in 1981 and in Trinidad from 1991. Well, from 1987, January actually, when I served in the Senate, to now. And at the last election, 2020, when I announced the PNM victory in Balizé House, I said to this country, I will not be doing that again. And I meant it, and I've kept it. I also said that I've brought into the political arena a number of young people who had served at that time one term. Many of them are still in government, about to complete their second term. Experienced, some of them with 9 or 10 years approximately of service in the government. So the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago have a cadre of people, mainly young people, who came into public service with all its warts and have prepared themselves to take this country forward. I had the experience of managing this country through COVID. Only today I was happy to receive on the way here a PAHO clearance from a concern that up to last night there was a concern that there was another outbreak of a COVID-type virus in China. The international agency has just confirmed to us that there's no need to worry and that the story about an emergency in China, the state of emergency in China, is not correct. I was particularly pleased to hear that because God knows we don't want to go through another COVID. So I'm here with my colleagues this weekend, and one of the things that they will be told is that I will not be offering myself again to represent anyone either in Trinidad or in Tobago 45 years is a long time. And I would like at this time to say thank you appropriately along the way to all those who have supported my effort and to have benefited from, I hope, I would have positively impacted this country somewhere, sometime. As we settle Tobago screening tomorrow, I continue to be the political leader of the PNM. We will call for nominations in the other seats where I represent the people of Diego Martin West, who have supported me resolutely from 1991 to now. And I will thank them appropriately and ensure that they are not left adrift. But I will not be offering myself, as I just said. And I'll say something else. Before the end of the legal limits of this term, I will resign this office and go off to my family. Thank you all very much, and see you again sometime soon.
Well, you heard the wows in the background very briefly there towards the end of that clip, and it was a lot more prominent on Friday's media briefing. One, a reaction to the Prime Minister's announcement, I would assume, but also the fact that the Prime Minister was very quick to say thank you very much and walk off, and no further questions necessary. So one will argue that this is also emotional time for Dr. Keith Rowley, 45 years in public life, particularly in the political arena. This is obviously a bit emotional for him as well. So in that regard, you can understand that the reactions of Mao in the background, I think, also associated with the shock of the announcement. Sean, there was one thing in particular that also caught my attention when he indicated that they faced relentless attacks. The thing is, exactly who was he referring to? Was he referring to other political parties? It was very open-ended, that statement.
Part of me suspects it's social media because, yes, the media might be included there, but social media allows for essentially the haters to say a whole host of stuff. Now, there are a couple of politicians whose language I generally do not appreciate and will prefer to never interact with in a professional capacity. I won't say who they are, but it is what it is. But that's a very, very, very small list, right, on people who I think are just not professional. With that said, part of it, when he said things like that, and one of my takeaways from the state of emergency part of the press conference, which was obviously much longer, is that to some extent, I do believe that a lot of our politicians, I don't know, I can't speak for other countries, but I suspect that our politicians, they don't fully understand why a cross-section or a subgroup of the population don't appreciate them. And I'm not talking about the haters. I'm talking about the undecided voters that are just more disappointed and upset over the state of things than, well, they just don't like the PNM or they don't like the UNC. And that's why I said, like, some of the defenses that he made of the SOE, I'm like, I'm not too sure if that's what people were complaining about or if they were complaining about it in that way. So when he says that there are haters coming in from all sides, part of it is I have to ask, to some extent, do they really have a proper gauge with regards to what people say about them in totality, not just the haters? But the people who don't care if the PNM succeed or fall, they just want someone to succeed, and that's interesting. But I think ultimately for him, he's in his late 70s. He just lost his second brother, and it's getting harder, right? And at the end of the day, and I could imagine it's very emotional. Trying to deal with, I mean, a lot of people, they can't deal with this stuff. I mean, I'm sure there's a meme somewhere, Obama, when he was elected, looks a lot younger than when he left office, right? Obviously 8 years does age a man, but
I think, Sean, that last point that you made there is very, very important. Because I think, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, following the passing of Lisa Morris Julian and her two children. The reaction that we saw from government ministers faced criticism from those in public. And I couldn't understand why, because we seem to forget that these individuals are human beings as well and are very much susceptible to the emotional aspect of it. So we can't always expect them, because they're statesmen or stateswomen, to always somehow absolve themselves from any sort of emotions associated with personal life or even with political life. So that point that you made in relation to the passing of his brother, I believe it was Alpheus who passed away last week, Sunday. Also, I think earlier last year in 2024, he lost another brother, Felix Joseph, who also passed away. I think with such happening at the prime minister's age, and having two daughters and having grandchildren, he obviously would be doing a lot of reflection. He'll also be doing a lot of internal reflection. Am I going to offer myself? I've offered myself for 45 years. Am I willing to do this for another 5 years? I'm sacrificing a lot when it comes to my well-being, my health, and also my family. Of course, there are those who are going to argue that the political aspect suggests as well that the country is in such a state that it's unattractive to lead a political party and to become the next prime minister because of how difficult times are ahead. There is that as well, of which of course, we will get into later. But surely there was a lot of reflection as well.
The thing is, ambitious men, you have to, competitive men, ambitious men, or women, you have to drag them away. They don't just give it up, right? That's number one. Number two, I think, look, there's good and bad for our politicians to be ordinary people. They're not extraordinary. We need to give them leeway to have order. And even if they're extraordinary, they're still human. But the thing is, one of the things that people need to understand, you judge yourself by your intent because you know what your intentions are. You can only judge others by their actions. And then we're assuming an intent. And if some ministers decided to make a moment to grandstand over Lisa Morris Julian's unfortunate passing, that's between them and God. I'm not interested in speculating about that at the end of the day. I didn't see anything to want me to have to go there. But the prime minister, he's lost his second brother recently. And to some extent, I think he could literally go to cabinet and basically a lot of people who may have been depending on him and say, listen, I'm in my late 70s. I've had COVID 4 to 5 times. Lord only knows what long COVID I'm having to deal with on top of other medical conditions a 78-year-old man has to deal with. And I now have to bury my second brother. I have done enough, right? I will help you with the transition, but we all need to kind of figure out what the PNM looks like without me. And I can't fault the man for that at all. And then he also made a good point. He wants to leave when he's on top. Why should he be forced out? Why should he wait until he loses an election to be kicked to the curb? What's the point in that? And to some extent, politically speaking, Keaton, if they do it right, I think where you started off, they could be refreshed. If they do it right in the long run, it could be better for the party. And if they don't do it right, then maybe in hindsight it might be viewed as a mistake. But I don't know if that's necessarily fair.
But then who is to decide what is right and what is wrong in this particular instance? Who is to decide this is the right thing to do? This is what we should not do.
I just want to get this in. We have the guests in, but I just want to say, I will bet you money that even in times like this, and the way how the government was managing the country, I don't think there's anybody that fully understands what went on with regards to all the variables and how they work together to get us to the point where we reach right now, right? So it's going to be hard to judge at the end of the day, but I think ultimately it all comes back to the fact that, look, at the very least, we're not going into a general election where we basically have two placeholder political leaders, potentially. We knew in one case it was most likely going to happen, and in the other case, we don't know. Kamala Prasad looks, or at least by my very, very unprofessional, inexperienced, ignorant eye test, She seems to be showing her age a bit more than Dr. Keith Rowley, but Dr. Keith Rowley, I know some people who are not PNM supporters but have concerns that he has health problems. He's, you know, regularly enough going abroad to do health checkups. So, and again, that's, you can add that onto the list of why I'm like, listen, if the man wants to retire, let him retire. 45 years, 10 years as Prime Minister, and he had to oversee us during COVID and the aftermath and the economic downturn before. As much as I complain about results, I'm not going to sit down here and say it was an easy job.
Well, questions surrounding exactly the Prime Minister's plan to resign from office before the end of his legal limit wonders who is exactly going to act as Prime Minister. Does it equate to an early general election? What does the Constitution say or provide in instances such as this? Well, hopefully our next guest can answer such questions. We're going to take a break here on the program, and when we return, I will try and seek those answers. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back.
But I will not be offering myself, as I just said. I want to say something else. Before the end of the legal limits of this term, I will resign this office and go off to my family.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, Meinl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust. Prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch ultra-slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. My colleague Sean Michael Small is referring to this as Talking Prime. Well, let's add to the mix this morning as we welcome to the program Dr. Shane Mohammed. Good morning, sir. And a very happy New Year to you. Welcome back to AM Prime / Talking Point / all of the above.
Thank you so very much. Happy New Year to the entire WESN team and to you fellas especially. What an interesting way to start 2024.
2025.
God, yeah, I need to remember that.
It's been so exciting, it made you forget.
It's forgivable. It's forgivable because I think there are those who are still having issues writing 2025 when it comes to dating anything. So it's forgivable at this point. It's only a week.
6 days into New Year, and it's already it's more exciting than we anticipated politically.
It's more exciting in the last 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, the countdown to 2025 was quite boring. In fact, post budget, yeah, we didn't have so much excitement going on.
Even the budget, even the budget was
yeah. We were like, oh, let's see what's happening here, and then there was a flop. So
yeah, it was Rocky 77. You know, it was just copy and paste.
Anyway, gentlemen, when all is said and done, as we could all agree upon, exciting times ahead and a very intriguing way to the start of the new year. But Dr. Mohammed, following the Prime Minister's announcement on Friday, were you at all surprised by what he has now publicly expressed in relation to his state of affairs? And furthermore, the timing of it seems, again, quite intriguing, given that we thought his main position on Friday was to speak about the state of emergency and the government's position.
Well, I wasn't surprised. The word intrigued, definitely. I was quite intrigued. I was intrigued for several reasons. That, someone asked me, what do you think he's going to say? He's coming to dissolve the parliament. I was like, no, he's not coming to dissolve nothing. He's coming to, I think the most he's going to do, he's going to come and blow out Akash and the media and tell them they're irresponsible, tell them they don't know what they're talking about, tell them that we need more patriotism in the country, we need more responsibility in the country. And, well, that didn't happen. It literally was the man just coming to say, listen, I'm alive, I'm well. Hope you all are alive and well as also. And he was as blasé as I could put it. Very much in that in his mindset seemed to be one that he was just ready to say, listen, I'm going to press the pre-retirement button and drop a bombshell and say, this is what it is, figure it out.
But in relation to how this can potentially impact upon a general election and other political institutions of their preparation for a general election, this really has turned things up a bit.
Yeah, it does. It has. To start with, the playbook now kind of more or less gets reset, and the drawing board should be one that political parties, read the United National Congress, should go back to, and they should go back to because now they have the reality that it is not going to be Prasad Visesa versus Keith Rowley in a rematch this time, right? So that's the first thing. Uh, what does the composition of the PNM look like? It's more or less the same with a few changes. Um, I'm interested to see what happens in the Diego Martin seats. Labre is already a foregone conclusion with Randall Mitchell, but I'm very interested in seeing who is the candidate in Diego Martin, um, Northeast, West, and Central, who is the candidate in Laventil East, Mova, and then the puzzle is completed. And judge the government by its composition. There are not many changes. Tobago stays the same. Um, the main the main players, I think, for the main characters, the lead actors coming off of the Golden Globes and coming into award season, the main actors in this game, in this episode of Trinidad and Tobago's politics, would be Keith Rowley, Carl Mimbert, and Stuart Young, and Fitzgerald Hines for sure. We know where Fitzgerald Hines is he's out. So and Rowley is on his way out, so he's retiring. Now we see if Imbert is gonna fight the system and say, well, y'all can't tell me when to resign or retire. I'll retire on my own terms. Or you could probably be saying, you know what, I've had enough of this. I've been in this for 30 years. Time for me to go too. And then we see some new people in Diego Martin, and we see a new prime ministerial candidate, not political leader, because nowhere in the script says there's going to be a new political leader before the general elections. So the UNC really needs to reassess its game, reassess its strategy, and quite frankly, reassess at least two out of the several candidates that have been announced in the so far.
Dr. Mohammed, I'm curious to know as it relates to our constitutions and what it provides. Uh, if the Prime Minister is indicating that he is going to resign from office before the end of the legal limits, what transpires then? Does it trigger an early general election, or are there provisions that would allow for a deputy political leader to lead the PNM in their final weeks or months, however the timeline may span out to be, when the Prime Minister then resigns?
So there's no the Constitution 76(1) going on gives us clear. It's very clear as to how one becomes prime minister. In the first instance, let me tell you, in the first instance, Section 76(1) of the Constitution says that the prime minister, after a general election, must appoint a prime minister who is a member of the House of Representatives and who, in the first instance, is the leader in the House of the party which represents or commands the majority of members of that House. Then it goes on to say that the person is usually the party's leader. Where no majority party emerges, or where the party has no undisputed leader, the president appoints a prime minister, the person who, in his or her opinion, is most likely to command the majority of support in the House of Representatives. And then in this case, the president can use his discretion to appoint the person, and the person must be willing to become prime minister. With that said, though, this has happened before in Trinidad and Tobago, and people have not realized it. We've had an election, and we've had a political party where the political leader did not seek the office, the main office for which the party was fighting the election, and that is in Tobago in 2021 when the PDP won the election for the THA. Watson Duke was political leader of the PDP, and the candidate, the choice for the chief secretary's position was clear that it was going to be Farley Augustine, who was the deputy political leader. So it has happened. We're just not paying attention at the scale that it has happened. And therefore, Dr. Rowley, his vacancy doesn't arise for political leader until 2026. And there's absolutely nothing that prevents him from stepping down from prime ministership. There's several things that can happen. One, he resigns as prime minister, retains the Diego Martin West seat until the end of the term and the expiration of the parliamentary term, which he calls the legal term of office, appoints a new prime minister. He's going to have the ear of the president. So he says, we're going with this person. And they continue until the person gets acclimatized and, settles into the office for a short period of time. And then he says, hey, time to call the election. He calls the election and they run the election. They fight on whatever policies. I'm sure Dr. Rowley's not just going to sit back and not be part of it. Even if he's not on all platforms, he could be on some maybe. And whoever the new candidate for Diego Martin West is, they will be showcased prominently, and they fight the election against everybody else and see who wins.
But the thing is, I'm curious to know if he is to resign the office before the legal limit is up. Exactly then, who has the responsibility of announcing the election date? Who then says this is exactly? So it's going to be the individual who is in that acting position.
Well, he's not going to be an acting prime minister. Once a prime minister once the prime minister has resigned, a new prime minister is appointed. No acting is appointed, right? So there's no acting prime minister.
George Chambers,
right?
Eric
so
Williams.
A new prime minister is going to be appointed, right? And then that person will sit in the office for a period of time, and shortly before the parliamentary term expires, they announce the date of the election and advise the president to dissolve the parliament.
I think the real issue is because whoever is going to be the prime minister up until the election is basically a caretaker, whether it's Dr. Rowley himself or
he's somebody. The OJT. He or she is the OJT. It's just a transitionary period.
Yeah.
But it's an OJT person, so it's someone who.
Well, hold on, because the question is, how do you pick the candidate? Whoever the prime minister is until the election, that's fine. They still have to pick. I mean, one would hope that the prime minister candidate that they have for the election is going to be the political leader.
No. Right? No. Hold on.
I understand what you said. I just don't know if it makes practical sense in this case.
Well, they are thinking the conversation that has emerged through this lady, Jennifer Batiste Primus. She is indicating that there should be an election where the party is given the opportunity to select and to elect its political leader. That's fine. That's all well and good, right? But Dr. Rowley's term in office as political leader of the PNM expires in 2026. So nobody's saying there's not going to be an internal election for the entire executive of the PNM, because now the entire executive of the PNM as a whole, right, the reconfiguration of the whole shebang is going to be due in 2026 because they've delayed, they've postponed the internal election, that they were supposed to have last year. So everybody had a big question mark as to why, how, what, when, who. It is to give the new political leader that emerges, whoever that person may be, or candidates who fight for political leadership in 2026 to configure a national executive or an executive of the PNM that they prefer. So until such time, Dr. Rowley is going to maintain his political leadership, and the general council sits, the chairmanships exist. The chairmanship of the party is one of the most powerful positions in the party, and they will decide who the candidate, the general council that is, will decide as usual who the next, who the candidate for Diego Martin West is, and chances are they're going to decide who the candidates for the Diego Martin West seat in particular is. Not, down the road. They have time. And Diego Martin West is considered a stronghold for the UN, for the PNM, sorry. It didn't shift except for in 1986. It didn't shift in 2010. So it's solid for them.
My concern is, and this might be much to do about nothing in hindsight when it's all said and done, but I guess what seems in my brain to be the likely scenario now is that either Dr. Keith Rowley or his interim replacement kind of oversees the situation until the elections are called, which will be next year, 2026, right? They still need to have a prime minister after the elections, assuming they win, right? To fully argue the scenario, say they win. So then now we'll have, what would be the correct process to pick that person? It's not the political leader, because you could technically pick an interim prime minister who is just there for a year, although I don't know how effective that would be. And then whoever is the political leader coming out of the internal elections could then, that's who moving forward, the majority, again assuming they win elections, of parliament will have this, who will support. So, but the problem is, like, how do you pick that, whoever has to sit in that seat? With regards to the PDP, basically they needed somebody, not Watson Duke. And Farley, of course, was someone who could handle himself a lot better. He was a much more popular candidate. If, from what I understand of the situation, it didn't work with Watson Duke, they went with Farley, it worked, right? That was, well, to some extent, you could say specifically to an election. In this case, it is, we're trying to deal with a transition that I don't know if they've ever really had to deal with quite this way. I could be wrong. And if you have someone that is an interim prime minister, well, on some level, either he's going to be so unpopular that internally they'll never vote for him, or if he's even reasonably popular, it might be like with Biden endorsing Harris at the 11th hour just before the way out. You kind of force the hand of the whole situation to just go with that person, and is it really a free choice then?
Well, we have to understand this, that in an article today, Dr. Rowley says, yesterday he said in Tobago that he's going to ensure that there's a seamless transition, one, and that no vacuum is going to be created, right? And he's right. I don't doubt that, because I'm 100%, he's 100% right that he's not going to create a vacuum. There's no vacuum that's going to be created, and there's not going to be any gap per se. It's going to be seamless. There are persons that are going to emerge within the PNM, and they're going to say, well, we need to have elections to choose the political leader. Okay, fine. That's going to happen. But in terms of the prime ministership, the first part of them choosing, well, who becomes prime minister, we've already seen who is now acting more recently as prime minister. And obviously, when somebody acts as prime minister, which is the prerogative of the incumbent prime minister to choose who he wants to act in his place, in his absence or in his ill health, etc., we've seen who that person has and is, and who has emerged, which is Stuart Young. And the conclusion, one of the conclusions that can be made is that the preferred choice of Dr. Rowley is Stuart Young. If you listen to his conversation, one of his statements is that over the last 10 years, he's brought in competent, young, brilliant people who are serving second terms, and some are finishing their first terms as members of parliament, ministers of government, and who are capable of taking the party forward. Okay, great, wonderful. He also has a cadre of also mature, capable minds and personalities within the party structure that are, albeit smaller in number, but very much popular. Number one on the list is Penelope Beckles. Number two on the list would be someone like Amory Brown. Number three, which is far-fetched because of the personality of the individual, but who is not someone that can be ruled out if they need be, is also Camille Robinson Regis. So you have three mature, experienced minds who's been around for a while, who's had experience in and out of government, who served in different capacities across each one of them. All three of them has served as a minister of government, they've served as a senator, they've served as an opposition MP, and they've served as a diplomat. So they've all served in the four main roles in governance at this level. Then you have, obviously, the Stuart Youngs, the Foster Cummings, the Faris Al-Rawis, and then sort of kind of maybe not someone that that Dr. Rowley thought had the capacity or the ability to become something, maybe something of a swan, or some sort of political animal, and that has flopped, which is Nyan Gatsby Dolly. So you have options. The choice, it comes down to who does the General Counsel think is best suited, and they would have to make that decision if they are strong enough to override the power that Dr. Rowley wields at this point in time, and who are the main influencers within the PNM structure in that moment.
And if the General Counsel is stable enough amongst themselves, even though they're colleagues, at this point, they could be seen as political rivals.
So they can be seen as political rivals. Two, they could become, all of these people that I've just called can now stop being silos, and they could start forming blocks and narrow the listing of potential leaders of the party to three, maybe, to two, maybe, by forming these power blocks. And by, let's be real, the PNM is an institution. The PNM is respected as a political institution. They've been around since 1956 for a reason. They have been able to sustain themselves for all these years and hold power for 75% of the time that we've been an independent nation. And whether we agree with well, in my instance, in our instance, but I could speak for me, whether we agree with their ability to effectively govern Trinidad and Tobago over the many years that they have, and some of the policy decisions that have caused us to be where we are economically and socially, whether we agree and disagree on that, or think they're incapable or not, what they are capable of is taking a political loss, sitting it out for 5 years, reconfiguring themselves quietly in opposition, and coming back stronger than ever. And it's been seen, it's been proven, it's been shown to have happened between 86 and 91. It's happened between 95 and 2001, and it has happened between 2010 and 2015. That's not to say, though, let me just make it clear to the audience and to everybody out there that's listening, that's not to say that the election results of 2025 is a foregone conclusion, because there's one person, one singular individual, one person alone, that has the ability to change the direction of this country. One person, this whole country, by their the ability to listen, to be clinical, to be rational, to be objective, to just be calculated and strategic, has the ability to decide where we go. And that person is the opposition leader.
Actually, is this, you've led up brilliantly to the position of the opposition leader, Kamla Persaud-Bissessor. Sean and I agree on one thing, that this was quite a mature move on the part of leadership of Dr. Rowley. But what position does this now place Kamla Persaud-Bissessor in, following the years of individuals from even within her own party calling for her to step down? Does this now just add pressure to Kamla Persaud-Bissessor?
No. This is a decision as you rightfully say, this was a personal decision of Dr. Rowley to decide, I've had enough. I've increased my salary as of January 2025. I have my back pay to collect. I have my pension to collect. For the rest of my life, I have a diplomatic passport for my wife and I. I think it stays between, no, and his kids. I have medical that's in the bag, and I have security for the rest of my life. I am fixed. I real good. I could drive up and down the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, be eating something, liming on the beach of Charlottesville, be chilling in Toku, chilling down in Citrus. I do have to worry about one single thing. So he real good, right? Whether you judge him by his legacy, the legacy has become a word in the aftermath of all of this. Whether this legacy is great, not so great, wonderful, it okay, it fair, fine in the greater scheme of things, he don't care either. I've done what I needed to do. And in the history books of the PNM's playbook, I've matched the leaders that have been my rivals. I've matched Patrick Manning. I have done my best in terms of going out into the history books. I will go down as one of the political leaders of the PNM that has taken the party into government and sustained government for two terms. He's real good. Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar it's a choice for her as well. She has the ability to decide what her playbook looks like. I think the UNC culture is very different from I know the UNC's culture is quite different from the PNM's culture. So let we be real. And it's less bacchanal in Balize House, really and truly in the greater scheme of things, for Dr. Rowley to get up and say, you know what, I done. I real good. Ollie go figure this out. I go help Ollie figure this out. In fact, I will direct the script for this, and then I will walk away. In Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar's case, if we were to get up one morning and hear Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar say, hey, hear what, I done too, then the whole UNC blows up, right? UNC headquarters is on fire. Man throwing missiles like it going out of style with each other. You would swear if some kind of gang warfare happening in Shogunas because man just all of a sudden turn on each other and everybody fighting for the Iron Throne, which is really like a plastic bottle melting in fire, right? So it's a totally different culture. What I think, however, is right now the best move for Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar. The question is this: what is her legacy? Can she be like Donald Trump and be the comeback kid? Can she be like Donald Trump and meticulously, objectively, rationally, strategically, clinically construct this framework that needs to have strong, brilliant, intelligent, charismatic, people-friendly, relatable individuals, young professionals, a backbone of mature politicians from within the UNC to create a team that is so magnanimous and so brilliantly structured that it completely outshines the UNC, the PNM's current cadre of persons. If that can happen, then Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar has more than a fighting chance.
Here's one comparison. Donald Trump had something that not a lot of politicians has, and it's not about who supported him, it's not about who his running mate was, it's not about what he said, it was about the fact that the American voter was like, time out, we don't want a used car salesman, business as usual politician, we want somebody else. What I never understood was how the Republican Party was so locked in, like the Democratic Party, on being corporate America, business as usual, let's not rock the boat, stability, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, the voters didn't really want that. Yeah, there was a hiccup when they voted for Biden instead of Trump, and they kind of gave in to the corporate sway. But they changed direction to tweet after they saw what was going on, right? This is a continuation from 2016. They probably would have gone with Bernie It wasn't unique to Trump. It was an environment of the voters saying we want something very specific to try to solve what we perceive as a very specific problem with the system. I don't know if Kamala has that, because I think most people who are not biased for one side or the other tends to view both parties as different sides of the same coin. Obviously, they have major differences, but in terms of motivations, certain policy decisions, certain modus operandi, to the man on the street, they look the same. So I don't know if she's done enough to really separate herself and say, hey, we could do better because we think differently. One of the problems is, since we don't have ideological differences in the parties, they're there, but they're very subtle and they're not stated. Outside of race relations and geographic locations, there isn't real, and the symbol and the names. Like, what differentiates our political parties? Well, the machine. And the UNC doesn't have the same machine as the PNM. So
let me just bring in for a moment the opposition leaders' initial reaction. And if it suggests, I want to, I really, really want to, because she has referred to Dr. Keith Rowley as a lame duck prime minister. And this is in her initial reaction, a lame duck prime minister who has led TNT to a failed state and is engaging in a perverse, wicked soap opera within the PNM while TNT is destroyed. He's indicated that his announcement is a clear admission of his failure to lead TNT effectively.
Or that he's 78 and he has to bury his second brother. By the way, does anybody else use the term lame duck besides me when it comes to local politics?
Yeah, I do. I use
Okay.
lame duck. So don't feel, yeah. Don't,
Okay,
yeah,
all right. I'm sorry.
We use lame duck. No, but listen.
So does her reaction indicate anything at all?
Listen. Dr. Rowley could choose to be lame duck. At this stage of the game, he don't care. To quite frankly, he don't care. He's done his job. He's done his aspiration. He's achieved his aspirations, right? And history will judge him accordingly. What history has to now judge is what happens next in terms of Mrs. Prasad-Bisessa's political lifeline, right? And she has one more chance. This is the last hurrah. There isn't going to be a sequel. There's definitely no rematch, right? So if she was looking for a rematch, it ain't happening. Dr. Rowley made it clear. Fight your battles on your own, sister. It will be against me. But how does, taking into consideration what you said, Sean, how does Mrs. Prasad-Bisessa do this? Because there is a stigma. Agreed. The options that are the alternatives to Mrs. Prasad-Bisessa is also not appealing. It's not picking up any traction. There's no tidal wave coming. There's no tsunami that's coming. There's no reincarnation of the COP. There's no rivalry of Winston Dukaran that exists against the UNC at this point in time. None whatsoever, right? Absolutely none. What does come into play is that there could be major upsets because there are two political parties that if you remember political history accurately, there are going to be political parties that have emerged that may play a team unity role as it did in 2001 and play a COP role as it did in 2007 and cause the PNM to pass through the gates of winning because significant number of votes have been taken away from the opposition. Now, I was asked the same question yesterday as to why is it always against the UNC? Because the PNM has maintained itself since 1956 as a stable, grounded, founded party with institutions and mechanisms by which it has been able to function with the loss of a political leader, with the loss of a general election, and with the transition of one leader to the other. What has happened on the other side? Party collapse, leader dead, resign, moved on, new party form, fight between themselves, party collapse, party, emerge. So there's no continuity of political parties. The UNC is facing this threshold where it's either do or die for them in 2025. They actually, if they lose the 2025 general elections, the chances of a new political party being founded and new persons emerging, and the likelihood of something different happening and the lifeline of the UNC dies is very real. But all of that could come to a stop if Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar reassesses the whole show, reassesses the whole playbook. I am very concerned about two particular seats. So let me explain to you what I explained on radio yesterday. In the PNM, there are 3 seats that has been proven to be the anchors of safe seats for the People's National Movement, which at its lowest in 86 survived, which was the 2 Laventils and San Fernando East. And then in 2010, there were 12 seats that stood the test of time, and they stood strong, albeit Diego Martins by very slim margins, but there were seats like Point Fortin and La Brea and San Fernando East that stood, Port au Prince South, that stood the test of time. Okay, great. But there's one marginal seat during the 36-week period when our seats were 36 that would determine the election, which was Tunapuna. So the Tunapuna seat and the San Fernando West seat and the St. Joseph seats were the 3 seats to look at, that if an election were to be won, those were the seats that would swing. Great. In the UNC, as of 1995, there has been the Superiors, the Princetowns, the Shogunas West, which was Shogunas at the time, which were the heartlands of the UNC, which has stood the test of time as well. But there's one marginal seat, which is also the anchor for the UNC. And if that marginal seat collapses, all other marginal seats go as well. And that seat is Barataria San Juan. So, here we are. Potential, no. Impending new prime ministerial candidate, new prime minister emerging, whether it's young or otherwise. But it's, right now it seems that all eyes are on Young. He's pressed the teaser button for his emerging as the next prime minister as of yesterday, when he showcased his fanciness and coming out in his suit and shades and whatever, all he works with it. So it is going to be, chances are, a Prasad-Bissessar versus Young. A man who is a personality who is, give or take, at least 20, 25 years, give or take, younger than Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar. One candidate. Possibility of a Penny Beckles versus Kamala Prasad-Bissessar. Who do you think is going to win? The Foster, I'm not too sure. A Faris, you never know. A Camille, well, we'll see. They are to duke it out, right? But there are at least 2 out of the 4 choices that could possibly move the party, the PNM, into victory. And if the UNC does not reassess the caliber of its candidates and understand that it needs to have a framework like the PNM of the Camilles and the Pennies and the Amories and maybe Imbert, to be that backbone of government that then transitions into the newbies that the Prime Minister talks about. And the PNM has very strong candidates in 2 major seats. A very strong candidate in Shogunas East and a very strong candidate in Barataria San Juan. What will happen if in a 2-man race, in a 3-man race in 2007, those seats collapsed and it went 26-15 in favor of the PNM? Let's not count Tobago, right? Let's give the PNM 20 seats in Trinidad and the UNC 19 seats in their current 19 seats. If there's a 3-man race and there's a strong showing from Michaela Pandey and the NTA with regard to swing voters and youth voters, and they have candidates that they see that they could identify with and they could relate to, what's going to happen to Barataria San Juan as the anchor for the UNC and the marginals? First seat to collapse. And when that collapses, everything else collapses. And then what happens? It reduces the UNC to something like 14 seats. Mass chaos is going to take place because everybody within the UNC and outside of the UNC is going to want Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar's head. So what am I saying? I'm simply saying this. I'm saying this for the whole country to hear, and I'm saying this to Mrs. Pasabi Sasa. You want to win, and how badly you want to win will be determined and it will be tested and tried by two things. Revisit Barataria Sanwan. I never said that Saddam Hussein is not capable of holding a seat. But this election is going to come down to a really close margin. And it's going to be determined by 1 or 2 seats at max. And you may need the help of Tobago to carry over the threshold if you don't hold on to 19 and pick up 1 or 2, right? So first things first, think about it from a 4-man race, think about it from a 3-man fight. If it's a 3-man fight, and even 500 or 700 votes are divided to another political party, you're going to lose Barataria Sanwan, you're going to lose Shogunas East, and then it's going to just continue with the trend going down. The party has to hold. Take Saddam, if you so love him and he's so great and you have so much confidence in him as a young person, take him and put him somewhere safer. Take Mohit she could be reincarnated into something else in the political structure. It's not hard. But give the party a fighting chance of fighting Stuart Young's PNM, right? And I'm going to use Stuart Young as the example here because he's heir apparent, right? Or heir presumptive, you choose, because it goes back and forth these days. Go back to somebody who has the ability to win Barataria Sanwan, right? The question people say is, we're here, wanted here, put in no nomination paper. We know better. We know how politics in this country works. People just get a phone call. They go in here, right? So miss me with the formalities. But the reality is, the UNC needs to reassess what the margins of errors are, and the UNC needs to reassess whether, Mrs. Prasad needs to reassess whether or not she truly wants to win this election.
After what you just said there, I'm actually of the mind that the answer might just be no. Because the response to the Prime Minister saying he's going to retire, I think it was kind of telling. I think he said something of the stigma of politics in the country, and it affects both parties, right? Well, she kind of did the usual, I'm just going to use this moment where he is going away to still throw shade at him. Now, what made it worse was that Gary Griffith had a very mature response. Gary Griffith, who leads a party which in the last couple of weeks now, we've heard from other people. So it's potentially going to shape up to not just be a one-man show, as opposed to other entities, right? Now, my thing is this. What was the purpose of trying to get another shot in at Rowley? He's out. You ain't running against him, as you said. You're not going to get a rematch. You beating him is not on the table anymore. And to me, to some extent, I don't know if they feel, we could have beat Manning back in 2010. We didn't need the partnership. The partnership was a mistake, or they just used the partnership as a vehicle to sink the threat of the COP, which I will always wonder what could have been. But I don't really see her making changes. I think too often now the politicians, Dr. Mohammed, look at them, even with the government's defense on certain things and what they think the issue are and how they speak about it, it makes me think they really don't see the world as how the rest of us see it. But
I'm also wondering if making those changes now and if making too many changes now could actually work against Kamala Pasabi-Sessa in the sense that it shows weaker. It shows. I'm just asking whether or not it can show weakened leadership, saying that okay, this is only reactionary. Given the Prime Minister's statement, this is only our reaction. We were just going with the same individuals. To be fair to
Dr. Mohammed, and I'll let you respond, but Dr. Mohammed was saying this before this all happened, like weeks or months ago, and I agree with it. The UNC does not seem particularly strong, and we've lamented that fact for the last 3 years. The PNM has basically, it's been uncompetitive. And when things are uncompetitive, why are we surprised that the PNM are going to coast? Like, who's going to blame them? That's human nature. Dr. Mohammed.
Let me ask you this. Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa is going to say that these people have been loyal to her, right? That loyalty is important. Loyalty is not equivalent to competence. Let's be real. You can be loyal and incompetent as you know what, right? And
in fact, communism basically shows that to be
But
the case.
let's go to it in a corporate world. Sir, I have been loyal. This is my right hand. This is my trusted right hand. He protects me all the way. And then he is loyal, but his incompetence shows when you get shot, or when you get fired at, or when a bullet grazes you in the corporate world, in the mafia world, and then his loyalty is no longer there, right? So because he tried. Let me ask you this. Let's take loyalty and put it down in a political world. Loyalty, how does Mrs. Prasad view loyalty? Loyalty is what they can do for her, or is loyalty what she can do for them? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're loyal to the political leader, that it is in your best interest to show your loyalty by 1, being honest, 2, telling her the truth, and 3, knowing what your limitations and capacity is in order to take your loyalty to a different level and to prove to the lady that I am saying to her that, listen, I know what my strengths and weaknesses are, and this is an election that you need to win for the preservation of your legacy, and therefore I will either do one out of 2 things. One, tell her I can't fight Barataria Sawa because I don't think that I could pull it from the PNM, given a 3-man or 4-man race, because you've done your studies and you've done the research and showed it. Or 2, simply say, ma'am, I could serve in a different capacity, but right now the main goal here is for you to become Prime Minister, the party to go back in government, and for us to create a sustainable and functioning administration that could work beyond 2030. That's what people who are loyal to the leader would say, and not ride the back of the leader for what she can do for them, and be awarding mediocrity, and be awarding incompetence, and awarding loyalty, when loyalty is only just the word loyalty in this instance is just simply a mechanism by which people get into office. And quite frankly, while the rest of the country is reeling from stagnation of the economy, low purchasing power, inability to find jobs, unemployment rates are high, the ability for degreed persons to get a stable job and a rewarding job in this country is near to 0, where there's been reward and awarding of different opportunities to political loyalists by the PNM, where we have low foreign direct investment, where we have a forex issue, where we have economic stagnation, when we are being looked at by the world as a failed state, then at the end of the day, power cannot simply be at the level of, well, I've whole office, I sit as an opposition MP in the house behind me, and that I get blue lights, a MP pass, and a title of the honorable. That is incompetence personified, political hypocrisy personified, and a true indication of why we are a failed state. In fact, I put this up on my WhatsApp status. Why nations fail? Why do nations fail? Some people need to take a read of it and see why nations fail, right? At the end of the day,
Dr. Mohammed, not to get too caught up, have you just described the leadership of Dr. Keith Rowley during his prime ministerial time? Have you just described what could be considered his legacy?
You said it.
I asked a question.
And the thing about it is, there's this, well, I don't want to be accused by people saying that I am part and parcel of the group of persons that are chastising the Prime Minister rather than thanking the Prime Minister for his service. Thank you for your service, sir. I'm so happy that you're leaving, but I'm also saying that you're not leaving the country in a better state than when you received it. And the days that are ahead is a crossroads for Trinidad and Tobago, because I'm not confident in the leadership of Stuart Young to take this country and the future for our children and our people forward in a manner that instills public trust and confidence, but also international confidence, right? When we have news reporters and when we have papers that are writing articles that literally, it's mind-boggling to think that people are writing things in the middle of a state of emergency about things that threaten our international and our local security. Where's the confidence in our nation? Where are the institutions that are secured Where are the institutions that are locked down? Where's the intelligence that finds the leak and gets rid of it, or eliminates it, or addresses it, or whatever language you want to use about securing institutions? If we are at a crossroads, as I have been saying for almost a year to 2 years now, that 2025 is going to be a crossroads for Trinidad and Tobago, then where does the onus lie? The government? The onus lies in the government that has been ruling our country for 10 years, and because they decided to change the leadership of the government, that means we get up one morning and kaboom, everything changes. Does that mean, therefore, that when we switch from the 31st of December 2024 into the 1st of January 2025, we all should have received a lump sum of money into our bank accounts, courtesy the government of Trinidad and Tobago, to make us prosperous, like has happened in Guyana when for the month of January and February of December, when the government announced certain, rewards or thank yous or whatever you want to call it for their prosperity? We are declining in prosperity. There are two international articles emanating from the British, from the UK, is it the Mail? Is it the UK Mail?
Daily Mail?
The Daily Mail, one, and the Guardian from the UK has written two damning articles about Trinidad and Tobago, and I have rocked back and read that as a political scientist and say to myself, by God, this is Trinidad and Tobago in the 21st century, 25 years into the 2000s. This is what we've become, a country riddled. I saw somebody post on Facebook, it wasn't me, but I saw somebody post, this is what you call a narco state. So we have regressed 50 years, maybe, back to the 1970s in a space of 15 years, and then we are not supposed to talk about the future of the nation really and truly sitting in the hands of one person. And people are going to say, why are you throwing so much rocks at Mrs. Prasad Sasan? Why are you doing? I am just simply saying, lady, I am begging you from behind this camera to tell it and shouting as best as I can for you to hear that the decisions you make based on loyalty and not competence and capability and ability and talent and skill set is going to cost this country a whole more than you imagine. And for God's sake, what is and another person wrote this last night. I saw this, who I think it was Gavin Nicholas. No, it was Vasant Bharat who wrote, exit or exist. You choose. At the end of the day, we need to figure out where are we going. And the only person who can really and truly tell us where we're going is the alternative to the government. When the Conservative Party was tripping over themselves, crumbling and collapsing over themselves, for 8 years they changed prime ministers 4 times. The solution was the stability of the opposition. What Sir Keir Starmer could have done for the British people. And he stood strong, and he chose well, and we saw the fruits of that labor literally come to fruition. What do you think is going to happen in Jamaica, in Canada? Justin Trudeau is not. You have to have massive changes. And with the recent collapse of his shift of his deputy prime minister, minister of finance, we can steer that Canada. Since 2023, Canada is saying they're getting ready to vote Justin Trudeau out, right? Look at what happened with the United States. They know the people of the United States got a taste. They got a taste. It wasn't the very best of tastes of Trump. But you know what? They say, we ain't going back down this road. We'll go back to Trump. The country wants, if you really and truly want the country to say, yes, Kamala could do it, Kamala has to prove it. And how does Kamala prove it? She chooses better candidates. She looks at the 10 marginal seats that exist, and she looks at the anchor that holds those marginal seats, which is Barataria Sawa, and she looks at the caliber of candidates that the PNM has put into play, and she has to understand in her brain, this is not a one-on-one election. This is not PNM versus UNC. This is coming down to PNM versus UNC versus NTA versus the Patriotic Front. And if that is what the race looks like, if in 2007, a three-man race, without the man who has held Barataria Samoa, holding down the fort in Barataria Samoa, out of the picture, and we saw every single marginal seat collapse and go against Mr. Manning was unpopular then, you know. In 2007, Mr. Manning was unpopular. Why did so many people collectively vote against him and still not win an election? They are going to be, I'm not going to say that they could, and it's easy to people to go rock back and say, well, you have an agenda. I don't have an agenda. The science is showing it. The numbers are showing it. That when you secure your anchor, your marginal seat anchor, when you secure it, and it holds that, and it has held in 5 out of 6 general elections, then you use that mechanism in an election that is going to be too close to call. Because what sense it make that you have an excellent candidate in St. Joseph, you've put a fighting chance in San Fernando West, you've put a really good option in Toco Sandy Grande, and then when Barataria Samoa collapses across the corridor, we all know it's a domino effect. And then down the road, down into all the way to Maruga Tableland. So then what happens? UNC at 19 now collapses and loses 2 at 17, and then point of pay is in play. Takes it down to 15. And who knows what happens in Mayaro? Takes it down to 14. Do I need to count and look at what the future looks like again? But that all depends on one person. The future of this country lies in the hands and in the mind and the decisions taken or not taken, and the reassessment of the reality that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa is not in a rematch. She's fighting a whole new battle all together, because it could be, whether it is Young, whether it is Beckles, whether it is Brown, whether it is Al-Rawi, whether it is Cummings, she has a fight.
I mean, the last THA and the American election kind of went along with your scenario. THA, it was essentially a landslide. Everybody thought, oh, the EBC is stacking the deck for the PNM, and yeah, that didn't prove to be true. PNM stronghold areas in the south all fell except for, well, Kelvin Morris's seat. Even the incumbent.
He won by 3 votes.
Yeah, right? I mean, they were close, but they lost. And then, of course, I think it was a shock to the Democrats how many marginal seats they did not win. They just did not win. Even the home state of their VP pick didn't help them whatsoever. And of course, they were doing a lot of, in hindsight, Monday morning quarterbacks, to borrow a phrase. But I won't be surprised to some extent if you're right, if only because I guess we don't even really vote, oh, I am in this constituency. I don't vote for my constituency. I vote for whoever I want to win the national election. And if the national picture ain't looking so hot, then it really don't, you need all your ducks in a row. Otherwise, it's kind of like a popularity contest, right? Who's going to back the losing horse?
Listen, I know for a fact, and I don't talk about things that I don't know. Because I knew that when I was one of the first persons that knew that Brian Manning was facing serious opposition in San Fernando East, and I brought it into the public's domain, right? I know for a fact that there are people that are interested in fighting elections for the UNC. I know for a fact that there are persons who are willing to put themselves in marginal seats and do yeoman service to take the party out of the clutches of the PNM, right? I know there are people who are very concerned about the possibility of Stuart Young leading the PNM and the PNM winning the election and he becoming Prime Minister. And I see him as being nothing more than a continuation of Keith Rowley's leadership, because that has been his protege for 10 years. At the end of the day, really and truly, the man has been minister in the office of the Prime Minister for 10 years. What do you think he's been doing? Crafting a narrative of his own? When Prime Minister is out of the country, have we seen any difference in communication or in relatability or in conversation with the people that indicates that this is different? No, we haven't, right? But what we have seen, right, is a continuation of same old, and do as I say, not as I do, right? But at the end of the day, on the flip side, the alternative side of it, we are looking on at a party that can win an election and do good to sustain itself beyond 2030 if somebody or the person in leadership just simply listen to what the science is saying. That's all.
Dr. Mohammed, I'm curious to know from what you've described this morning, from what you've said and from what you have not said, what you think, what kind of leader does Trinidad and Tobago need going forward? Do we need a mature leader with years of experience, or is the time right for young, fresh blood? And I guess there's also a definition that is associated with young, fresh blood.
One of the questions I was asked yesterday evening, and I'll bring it back here, was in lieu of Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, if we were to look at an alternative to Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, who do I believe within the current framework of the UNC could lead the party in the from the House of Representatives? And of the 18 people that exist, really and truly, there was one person, was one person. And that person has had the best political training that anybody could ever want. Direct training from their political leader, stewardship, taking them under their wings, ability to debate immaculately, words slip off the tip of their tongue with such vigor, and all of that, right? But at the end of the day, the image of the individual has not been rebranded quick enough for that person to take up the mantle as the next leader of the UNC. And to start with, the vacancy for leadership of the UNC does not arise. It is Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar. That's who we have to go with for now. That is who we're going to go with into the general election. So let's clearly talk about alternatives. What the country needs right now is for reason, for objectivity, for rational, for the idea that the UNC is a cult to be removed, for the decimation of this whole, oh my God, this person is loyal. For me, loyalty to me as a leader would be proven by your ability to take me and to help me win a general election. The majority of the opposition is unfavorable in the eyes of all voters. There's nothing that, and I've said this a couple of weeks ago, I'll say it again, nobody comes out yet as an X factor that has excited the people to go, oh, wow, wonderful, this is great. There's nobody young, there's no youthful person, there's no outstanding, brilliant engineer or doctor or lawyer that has come out, or business mind or academic that the UNC has brought onto the platform to even say excitement. The first excitement, to be quite honest with you, would have for the UNC to show that it was conglomerating and, you know, doing what Dr. Rowley did with the Manningites and bring everybody back into the fold, would have been to give Dr. Khan Barataria San Juan and close that gap. And people would have been like, this is something happening here. Excitement is happening here. Then when you give Dr. Khan Barataria San Juan and you hand Devish Miraj Aranguez St. Joseph, and then all eyes are now on St. Augustine to see Vasant Bharat is going to do it. And you line up those towers, you start building that wall, that wall that they call the blue wall in the United States. You start building a wall across the corridor, right? And you put Sturge to hold the anchor down to hold the fort down in Toco Sandy Grande. And he needs to go and charm all of Valencia and all of Toco, where the votes really come in favor of the PNM. Then you're looking good. And then you go down and you put a strong candidate in Chaguanas East to really and truly to wrestle somebody that invigorates the mind of the swing voters in Chaguanas East to not go towards Richie Sukai. Because with all of his inhibitions and all of his quote-unquote weaknesses that they will use against his inability to speak, debate, his nervousness, his anxiety, whatever the case may be, that doesn't stop the man from being a good candidate, right? So you can talk, listen, there has been minister, we have had a prime minister of the United States who understands that he has a stomach, and because he's had that stomach for years, he has been able to work to control his fumbling of words and his stammering, much to great criticism, but has risen to prime ministership, presidential status. So, come on, people. If we really and truly want this thing to work, then with all of what the fanciness going on in Tobago, and all the wonderful breakfast and lunch and laughter and joy and camaraderie that's happening in Tobago right now by the government, all is not well there, you know, because they're trying to figure out which one of us will stand the test of time and get to become leader. That's their fight. The UNC has a leader. The question now is, how does that leader maximize on the cracks and the gaps and the weaknesses that exist in this administration to take them forward? And it is not no walk in the park. People are not going to just sit down and say, it's true, you know, the PNM left us and this and that and the other and the other and the other. Let me go calm now. Not going to be like that. If anybody gets up and believes that this is a walk in the park election for Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, then they're singing sweet lies. Lies sweetened with honey and sugar to the lady.
Well, Dr. Mohammed, I want to thank you for joining us on the program this morning. I'm sure there's a lot more that we can get into, but for the extensive conversation, thank you for joining Sean and I. I think this is the first time Sean and I have co-hosted the Prime and have you on a program. So thank you very much for your analysis. And of course, as you mentioned, as we've all mentioned, it's an exciting time. So let's see what happens next.
The crossroads of a nation that stands in the hands of a limited few, maybe one.
It's hard to digest and hard to fathom that is the reality of which we find ourselves in, given our current situation. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of decisions to be made. And following this weekend's meeting in Tobago amongst cabinets, I wonder what was said or what was decided, if anything at all. But Dr. Mohammed,
cussing might have happened. They would have gotten heated. I mean, listen, not because we take a picture and all of us smiling over some rock that we find in the Magdalena yard means that we all happy doing, you know. When we all turned our backs from all of those pictures that we saw with them all talking in the road and waiting on their vehicles to pick them up. That don't mean when we went back to we rooms, we didn't start to be cussing each other, taking a drink, calling we wife or we husband, or we significant, or we mother or we father, and saying, this so and so and so and so and so, I can't take this, but I gotta figure it out. That's the thing about the PNM though. They have the ability to mask their frustration very well. Right?
Yep.
And make the country believe that they are so stable that they will vote for them again. That's
well, one thing
problem.
is, I mean, that's excellent on their part, but one thing is for certain, Colm Imbert will always have a smile on his face no matter what. He always
even
seems
if
to
somebody dead, boy. I mean,
individual.
listen, I was so disgusted, even when somebody has died. I mean, dude, you need to stop smiling because you just come across as the Grinch.
No, I just, usually the Grinch doesn't smile, so I'm like,
You know the Grinch has that grin? There's a grin that the Grinch has.
It's a smirk.
There's a smirk? Yeah, Imbert's smile is not a smile of, it's a smile of deception. I will never want to work with a man that has a smile like that. Because you never know what is in his brain.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for the conversation this morning. We're going to take a quick break here on the program, but stay with us, ladies and gentlemen, because later on we will be opening up the phone lines. Lots more to come on Talking Prime. Stay with us all. We'll be right back.
But I will not be offering myself, as I just said. And I'll say something else. Before the end of the legal limits of this term, I will resign this office and go off to my family.
treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, Meinl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No, not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us this morning as we continue with our analysis of the Prime Minister's comments, well, his announcement last week, Friday, in relation to his future as Prime Minister and his future in the political arena. He plans on exiting office resigning from office before the legal limit for this term is due. We are now joined by Mariano Brown, former government senator and former minister of various portfolios, actually. Good morning, Sen. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Well, in relation to the announcement, the Prime Minister followed up in an interview stating that he was surprised that people are making such a big deal about this, and he believes that this is how it ought to be, that he's breaking ground for new reason. What is your take on the Prime Minister's announcement?
I don't have a problem if the Prime Minister decided he wants to go. That's fine. I think that's admirable that he should decide to step away at the height of his career as a Prime Minister rather than be voted out into oblivion. So I think that's a sensible move. But what concerns me is how do we address the leadership succession issue? I think that's a key point. It might not be so important for Dr. Rowley, but it's important for the rest of the country. It's an election year, and we are aware that the country faces a number of challenges on the economic front, on the socio-political front, certainly with regard to crime. Right? We are talking about looking at a decline or some level of depression, right, certainly taking place over the next year or two, notwithstanding the so-called positive outlook with regard to our growth rate. The reality is that we continue to run deficits. Deficits are not sustainable in the long run. And 16 years essentially is carrying us to a position where our deficit is reaching what one would consider to be an unsustainable level. So this is not a situation that allows for a lot of latitude, right? Certainly from the point of view of a management perspective. That's one of the reasons why companies are always very clear, right? One is going, one is coming. We know what's going to take place. Somebody's going to take over. This is what the position is. And what we have left here, what the Prime Minister has done is creating a leadership vacuum. We know he's going to go, right? He said so, but he hasn't said when. He hasn't set any type of process. So what takes place in the meantime, right? And I don't think that that's acceptable, that this should be left, that the country should be left in limbo, right? If you're going and you've made a decision to go, then go. Right? And what we need to get on with is the business of succession. Who is going to take charge?
And that is, I mean, in your opinion, is this something that can only be done internally? That's something that only the PNM can now decide in respect to succession?
Well, that's pretty clear. There's the only thing that can happen in the meantime, where normally elections determine who is the leader, and parties determine who they will put as their political leader. Right? The country doesn't determine that. The country determines which political leader is acceptable at the polls. So the party has to determine that. Now, the constitutional provisions narrow the field. Right? A successor Prime Minister can only be decided, can only come from the 22 members of the House. The Constitution requires that the Prime Minister is an elected member of Parliament who can command the majority in the House. Now, who is that? And quite frankly, you can't settle by the political question by a caucus. That the 22 senators, or the 22 MPs get together and they decide which one of them is going to happen. Right? They are all there by virtue of the fact that they've been selected by a process which have given them a seat. For example, the elected members of Parliament are ex officio members of the General Council of the PNM. They don't have the same voting rights as the other members of the General Council. In fact, they have less voting rights. The people who matter are the heads of the various constituency groups. We have about 41 constituency groups in the country, which basically is in line with the 41 parliamentary seats. They have about 2 or 3 representatives from every constituency, and then there are officers of the PNM who are elected. And the officers of the PNM include the General Secretary, the Chairman of the party, the Deputy Chairman of the party, the Treasurer, etc., etc., etc. They have about 16 positions. Right? So you're talking about a group that is about 150. Now that group can determine who is the interim political leader. Ultimately, the party has to decide whom they want as political leader. Now, that Dr. Rowley adjusted the constitution of the party to go to a one-man, one-vote position, which is different from the sort of constituency position we had before, right? Which was elected essentially by the representatives of the various committees of the constituents. So in this particular instance, since it is one man, one vote, then by definition, he ought to face whoever it is. There ought to be some sort of mechanism for the recognition of the succession issue. Who is going to be the leader? Why is this important? Well, people hold a seat in parliament because the party selects the representative that is going to contest the election. He didn't get there by himself, so they can't decide, or the 22 of them decided, well, we're going to pick one of us. That has to be decided by the party machinery. And the party machinery in this instance is either 1, the General Council, or 2, the membership. The highest organization or mechanism in the PNM's constitution is a convention. The second mechanism that comes after that is the General Council. Now, in the circumstances, which would you have first? Settlement at the General Council level, right? In other words, constituency heads, or you want to have it settled at the level of the convention. I would think that given that this is a political year and that you want to have the party lined up, then by definition, you ought to do it in a transparent manner in which everybody decides who is the best of the available candidates. And the only available candidates who can satisfy that definition are the 22 members who are currently in the House of Representatives. So that excludes all the senators. Somebody will have to take over Dr. Rowley's seat, and if and when he does, and he's interested in leadership, well, he'll have to wait on the next convention. The reality is that we need a political leader to lead the party to coalesce the party to carry it into an election year. This is not a simple thing, and these are difficult times. So you have to have a unified front. So I am putting my head on the line and what I would suggest, and I also hold a position in a business school. Leadership is important to us. We talk about it, we teach about it, right? And that's one of the reasons why I'm making the point. The country needs to have a settled leadership position, right? If there's somebody who's going to be responsible, has to be able to articulate a vision, has to be able to take responsibility, then we ought to know who it is, and it ought to be decided in a fashion which is transparent and clear.
Well, we already saw, Mr. Brown, that the current situation, there have already been people saying, hey, this is undemocratic, what's going on with the convention, what's going on with the attempts to replace Dr. Keith Rowley. We need things settled. And the irony is, at least before last year, we didn't have a state of emergency, and now all of a sudden we kind of have this in the mix as well. To what extent would youth consider the uncertainty potentially kind of spilling over to how the country views the current state of emergencies being managed, and it could, if not, you're calling for more transparency, you're calling for more information now. You don't want to necessarily wait 6 months to find out what's going on. The public, I assume, you would also assume as well, is waiting on more information. If they don't kind of give us something more, can it just compound with a state of emergency that people are questioning and it could affect the PNM's chance in the general upcoming because they just don't seem as stable as they should be?
Right, let's get a few things clear. First of all, we are in an uncertain territory to start. We don't need to have to wait for what you call it. We have all the information we need, right? We know that the Prime Minister is going. What we don't know is when, right? And I think that mechanism ought to be sorted out as quickly as possible. If you're going, go. Right? Because you need to give the party a chance to heal, and a party, whoever it is coming in, a chance to lead. In which case, you are going, get out of the way. Point one. Point two, in a situation where you know that something is going to happen, but you're not clear about what is going to be and who's going to be the leader and so on, that leads to all sorts of uncertainties. Who am I negotiating with from a business perspective? Trinidad and Tobago is open for business. Business is not business as usual. So here we are in the middle of a difficult situation. We have negotiations to carry out. Who is the decision maker? What's going to happen? Who am I agreeing with? Or am I agreeing with somebody who's going to change and have to go back and do it again? Now, I don't know whether you recognize it, but that leads to postponement of investment decisions. We are not in a situation where we want any postponement of investment decisions. We have to make business decisions today. Today. Right? So the longer that Mr. Dr. Rowley drags on this issue about when he will go, it's not magic anymore. Right? You have already decided. Nobody told you had to go. You decided. Well, if you decided you have to go, put a date on it and let's get on with it.
But Mr. Brown, good morning. How are you, sir? It's Happy New Year. It's good to see you.
Happy New Year to you too.
Wouldn't you say he will reply to you and others and myself by saying, I've made a decision to go. You can't tell me when to leave?
Well, I mean, that would be self-serving in the extreme.
And isn't that what it is from now? The fact that it is self-serving because he has shown that he will defy the General Counsel. He will defy his colleagues, and he will do things as he pleases. And he's stepping out of normal PNM practices by wanting to quite possibly force a leadership onto the party system.
I don't think he's clear. I don't think he has the power to force a leader into the party situation. Whatever happens, when he is not in office, right, and he will not be, he said so, he says he's not going to be in the running again, then he becomes John Q. Public. He's an ordinary citizen. He may have some influence among certain people within the party, but he then becomes irrelevant.
What prevents him? What prevents him?
In those circumstances, no, let me finish. And in those circumstances, he won't be able to change anything. So if he appoints somebody now, forces it on the party, what do you think is going to take place next when he goes? You think the person is settled?
So
no.
So does
the leadership issue will not be settled then.
So is it then therefore that he's aware of, but obviously he has to be aware of all of these things. But what happens in a situation where he retains the political leadership until it's constitutionally due next year?
That's impossible.
By virtue of the PNM Constitution?
That's impossible by virtue of the PNM Constitution. The PNM Constitution is clear, political leader. The man who is political leader has to lead the party. Right? He's the one who has to make the decision. You're going to have a prime minister, right, who is running the country, but he can't make the decision because the policy-making arm is led by somebody else.
That just says the chairman of the party.
That's not going to happen. Right? That's not going to happen. What you call it, that type of situation, that power dynamic immediately leads to conflict.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think when you say that's not going to happen, is it safe to say that you're saying that in the sense of, by your judgment, that really, really should not happen, but it's not impossible that if we want to call it a bad decision, it's not impossible for them to make a bad decision.
Well, it's not impossible for anybody to make a bad decision. All right.
Because
I would like to credit with Dr. Rowley with having made a good decision by deciding to leave. I think so. Right? And I think he has made his political calculation abundantly clear. right? He's threatened to do it before. He isn't prime minister yet. So in 2014, 2015, he says that, you know, if I don't win, I'm not going to stick around. Well, right, there's number one shot. In 2020, he says the same thing. Well, what do you think is going to happen at this stage of the game, right? And the third thing, the third will go around, listen, if you decide and you're going, you're gone, right? The idea of having a political leader and a prime minister does not line up. The Constitution is very clear. It's the one who is likely to have the commanding majority of support. So you have the majority support in the House. You command it, and they have a political leader pulling the strings from behind. The only place that has happened, and it was a contrivance, was in Barbados, right, where you had a political leader. Here's how the political leader did it. Right, the political leader, right, had lost 2 elections. If he had lost a third, the Constitutional Convention, the party convention in Barbados is very straightforward. You lose 3 times, you're out. They have no argument about it. That's something that everybody accepts. So you may be the best person for the job, but you lose 3 times, you're gone. For that to happen, for something to change, the party has to come together and everything else and so on. So David Thompson decided, well, hang on a second. The chances of my winning the next election are not so clear. So you know what? I'm going to step down as political leader. So he steps down as political leader, but keeps the leadership of the opposition in the House. Because he could only, the only person who could be head of the opposition has to be a sitting member of parliament. And he appoints somebody, or they get the party appoint somebody. One Dr. Maskell, a university lecturer, a young, ambitious university lecturer, who ran into the space created for him, right? And he led the party to the next general election and duly lost. Guess what? He didn't win a seat either, right? Now you think that that just happened by chance? Absolutely not. David Thompson knew exactly what he was doing, and he helped make certain that Mr. Maskell didn't win a seat either. That's what politics is about, unfortunately. People are deceitful, right? David Thompson, at the end of the election, well, you lost the election, you didn't win your seat, you can't be the political leader. Goodbye, you're gone. Here we are going into a general election. You are thinking that it's possible to have the man who is prime minister retain the leadership of the party until 2026 and he's not in parliament? No, 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 no. That will not work.
What does so okay, it doesn't work. Can you all force him out? Is the council, is the general
yes, the actual general council can force him out.
But let me ask you this.
The answer to that is yes. And I want to say to you, no, stick a pin. Mr. Manning lost the election in 2010. Right? Monday the 27th or Monday the 25th or whatever. Lost the election in 2010. The general council was called on the Wednesday, right? General council had bumper turnout. Everybody knew how that went, right? The first man to speak in the general council, right? Mr. Manning stands up and starts to talk and offers his resignation, right? But also offers to operate as interim political leader until a new design is sorted out. The current general counsel, the party general secretary, right? One, Foster Cummins. Foster Cummins is the first man to stand up. And Foster Cummins stands up and says, well, I thank the Prime Minister for offering his resignation, but I don't know what he's doing here. That is not for him to be considered. That is not for him to address. That is for this General Council to address. You think the same Foster Cummins at this stage of the game? I'm interested to see how this is going to work out. The same Foster Cummins is going to let the political leader step down as Prime Minister, decide that he's stepping away from politics and retain the political leadership, right, before the General Council? No, 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 no. I mean, the General Council might be sheep sometimes. I don't think they will be very full of sheep on this occasion.
So, okay, so that was my question. Who in the General Council do you think can
I'll give you one. I'll give you one, right? Jennifer Batiste has already said what the position is. So that's 2, right? Now we have another 125 people there. You think at this time, as we are speaking, right, some of those potential leaders and not canvassing the constituencies as we speak? Well,
I
of
think
course
that's
they
already
are.
happened. I think this has happened before the announcement on Friday. I think we were the last to
all
find
right.
out.
All right. You
Yeah.
take that. But everybody is scared. So at this stage of the game, the Prime Minister comes before the General Council says, I've resigned. Well, all right. So what next? Right? Of course, that's the question, and he can't come before the General Council and Bram. So I don't think he has too much time. Right? They have
But
to
the
have
way he
a council
behaved,
meeting this month.
the way he behaved on Friday, and by his narrative and what he said on Friday, he behaved as if he knew for a fact, as if he had the assurance in his hand that he was protected and he could do as he pleases or as he wished in terms of resigning prime ministership before the legal term is over.
When do you rock the boat?
At the end of the day, at the very end, you rock the
All
boat.
right. So you play your hand, and you've played your hand. I haven't told you what I may have intimated what my hand is. I haven't played it out as yet. So there are a lot of let's apply some logic to this situation. All right. You think the party wants to go into the election in this confused array, given everything else that is taking place? If you were a member of the party and you operating at management level, you want to win. You are going to present a disunited front, or alternatively a front which suggests disorganization to the country, and then you are going to tell the country that you are going to lead it to a new horizon. Well, who's going to take you seriously?
Mr. Brown, you gave an example of back in 2010 when the election was lost by Mr. Manning, but I get this impression that Dr. Rowley wields a lot more power and influence. I mean, how influential do you think he can be in his success and in trying to find whom his successor is?
You are always powerful as long as you remain in the chair. You get out of that chair, you leave the power behind. You then have influence, and that influence is limited by the amount of power you can wield. And if you're not in a position to wield power, you are dead. So Dr. Rowley as Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley as political leader has clout. Dr. Rowley as a man who has said, I am going to resign, I am resigning. Well, the how shall we call it? The edifice of power now begins to crumble, right? What are you influencing? You want to influence the succession? Well, I want to be success. I want to come. This one want to come. We're going to talk. What is the medium? It's not yours to give. The constitution of the party says very clearly a political leader is elected by the convention. In the absence of a convention, they may appoint an interim political leader at the level of the General Council. Now, you're going to keep the whole General Council in line?
Well, okay, let me ask you this. In 1981, when Mr. Chambers was...
Completely different circumstances. Completely different circumstances.
Because the political leader was deceased.
And he's dead. So what you call it, it's clear. There are two vacancies.
Right, okay. Right. In this instance,
there are two vacancies.
So there's vacancy for political leader.
And there were elders in the party who carried weight and seniority. There were elders in the party who carried weight and seniority. You'll have to remember that the president at the time is a former member of the party and would have worked very closely with Eric Williams in terms of formulating the constitution. He was an ambassador, he was an attorney general, right? He knew everybody. They all knew one another.
So isn't that the same circumstance with the current president knowing everybody?
Absolutely not. She does not have the clout of Ellis Clark. Ellis Clark was a practitioner in his own right. He had written the constitution. He knew what it was about. He had been involved in the negotiation. Christine Kangaloo has been a minister. She has been there. I'm sure she has some influence. She does not have the same level of gravitas as an Ellis Clark. So to
no, I'm not
comparing. She is going to make that kind of influence on the party.
No. I'm not alluding that she will. I'm not saying that either. I'm not saying in the capacity as her influence in the party. I'm saying that, she would be in a position like Sir Ellis as a president to act in accordance with the powers vested in her. But we have a scenario here where the political leader is alive and he wants to sit in the general council, and his term in office carries him to 26. So there's somebody within the general council, and
No. His term in office doesn't carry him to by definition. He has already signaled the end of his term. He has signaled that he's not going. The election is constitutionally due by August the 20th,
right?
Plus 90 days thereafter,
right?
All right. He has already signaled that he's not what you call. He's not running for office. He's not going to as he said at this point, he's not representing anybody in Trinidad and Tobago again. Yes?
Yes.
Well, are we staying on as political leader? Under what rubric?
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just don't necessarily
think it can work.
No, it's not that. I'm not going to necessarily assume that the people in question are going to act in a manner that we would think as straightforward and reasonable. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but like I understand what you're saying, Mr. Brown.
Are you suggesting, Sean, that they may not adhere to the PNM's constitution?
I am saying that some of them might be smart men or smart women. That's what I'm saying, and
well,
they may
I'm hoping that they are.
No.
Not in the fashion that you suggest.
Exactly. It's not what I suggest. It is the fashion that Faris Awari suggested with regards to obeying the public health regulations just before they tried to get the head of police legal off and the Coast Guard pension.
More reliable.
So, Mr. Brown, I'm, in respect to going forward, I mean, there's obviously some confusion. The Prime Minister has indicated he will not leave a leadership vacuum. There will be no leadership vacuum. But as you mentioned at this point, there's still a lot of uncertainty, even when it comes to investor confidence and decisions when it comes to final investments. I mean, do you think that the Prime Minister at this point, one could argue it's a great initiative on his part, it's mature in respect to leadership, but is it also doing more harm than good?
It will do harm if he continues to leave us in this nether world where he's going, but we're not certain by what date, and we're not certain who's going to replace him. The mere fact that he announced that he was resigning has put a timetable on this. Right? And my timetable is 30 days. Right? Nothing longer than that. Right? If at the end of 30 days, Dr. Rowley is still in office, then I'll have to say Dr. Rowley wasn't serious. Now, and there are political consequences to that as well. The public is looking on. And I don't think if that were to happen, that the public would be very happy. Right? I think that there'll be a certain level or lack of credulity that would take place. Right? He could put the party in that type of danger, and the party machinery and its, how shall we call it, its leadership, because the leadership of the party is considered to be the executive team. Right? And that executive team is made up of the political leader, the party general secretary, and the deputy political leaders. All right. So if that executive wants to go into an election, right, with that sort of level of indecision within the party, but I don't know if it's an indecision or undecision, because it's not really a decision at this stage of the game unless you put some finality to it. I'm leaving at this date. I'm resigning as Prime Minister at this date. Right? I'm stepping down from the leadership of the party. This is the mechanism we're going to use to move forward. Right? If those things are not done, then we have to query with the seriousness of this particular maneuver. And I make the point that it is unacceptable to say that I'm going to go, but I don't know when. That is totally unacceptable. That puts the country and the party in limbo. That is not responsible. And irresponsible actions of that nature are invariably dealt with at the polls in a manner which becomes abundantly clear. So if they want to wait until election day to find out what will happen, I could tell them that now.
Well, so let me just get something right. because you're saying that the political leadership and the prime ministership is tied together, and therefore he cannot be stepping down as prime minister and maintain political leadership.
Yes. So here's my timetable. Let me say to you what I think needs to happen. The first thing that needs to happen is they have to settle the leadership issue in the party first, right? The day that is settled, the prime minister steps down the next day, and the person who ever wins the leadership struggle, the leadership contest, whatever they call it, right, he becomes prime minister. That becomes abundantly clear what's taking place. So the first order of business is to settle the succession issue. The second order of business is to determine who is prime minister.
Well, that's $1 million question. Is there anybody within the PNM? Because Patrick Manning's last administration was built around him. Keith Rowley's current administration is kind of, to some extent, built around him. Do you see anybody that could command the support of enough of the party without it turning into a bloodbath to see with the power struggle to who will succeed Dr. Keith Rowley?
Power struggles within political parties lead to bloodbaths, but they need not necessarily be a bloodbath. That's why you want to have an organized succession methodology, which everybody could agree on. So nobody could come away and say, that didn't happen right, or this didn't happen right, or so on and so forth. Right? So that's the first issue. You settle leadership first. Right? And then when you settle leadership, all else will be determined. Now, the constitutional structure of the party clearly gives weight, a lot of weight, to the political leader. That's a constitutional issue. But that's those are issues each individual party has. Right? Now let's just for the point of sake of argument, let's look at some other political parties elsewhere. Look at the Westminster system. Right? Let's look at the Labour Party. Let's look at the Conservative Party. The one thing that was responsible for the decimation of the Conservative Party in the last election was precisely the issue of leadership. And it is still completely lost in terms of where it is going with regard to leaders. Right? That killed it. Right? On the other side, whatever the weaknesses of the Labour Party knew who was in charge, where they were going. How did the country vote?
Labour.
That's it. Right? Here we are now. So we think that people are different between countries. The British people are different. People are essentially the same everywhere. Right? That's one of the reasons why in management studies we make some cultural alignments across countries, but we know generally speaking this is how people will behave. Right? That's why we study the issue of management and science and try to basically put some scientific principles around it. We can expect that people will behave in certain ways. Right? Let's come to our situation here. They will carry out this leadership issue on a prolonged basis going into election year. That's impossible. Not if you're serious about winning the country, and not if you're serious about winning the election and running a country. This has to be settled in a month, right? To allow the next leader time to coalesce the party around him, right? And to lead the party into a general election. There are policies that have to agree on now are difficult policies, you know. And you can't have an interim political leader who's not sure about who's going to support him, what's going to happen. They have to get agreement on this quickly.
Is this similar to what happened in the American election, where essentially, in hindsight now, there's regret that Kamala Harris just did not have enough time when Biden dropped out? She didn't have enough time to campaign. She just had a couple of months. I think it was 3-4 months. And you're trying to avoid that, I would imagine.
Right, well, you can't help if you have a flawed candidate. It don't matter how much time you have, right? You might have a better showing, right? But a flawed candidate is a flawed candidate, right? So let's not get caught up in the American situation. The same thing will apply here. If you have a flawed candidate and he doesn't have a party behind him, you are in trouble. Right? The last thing that you want to project in these circumstances, allow people to see, right, is to believe that you are not in control. The country has difficulties. We're in the middle of a crime situation. The examples that have come across are very clear, right? all of our branches of the justice system are under threat. All. Right? We know that. In those circumstances, whoever is coming has to have a firm pair of hands. And he ought to have people around him who is going to help him, who will help him in those circumstances, not people who are basically going to look to take advantage of his weakness. So this is what is required. In the 1981 circumstances, notwithstanding Mr. Chambers' issue, right? The deputy political leaders rallied around Chambers. He was the undisputed leader. Whatever we may have thought about him, and quite frankly, I think he did a rather good job. And I think that because he wasn't strong enough, because he was not strong enough, some of the economic policies that he wanted to pursue, they didn't let him pursue them. As a result of which, right, the NER came into office and they talk about NER policies. All the NER policies were PNM policies that are included in what you call it, not the perspective, the imperatives of adjustment. The NER put into position PNM policies that PNM policies were not brave enough to do. Let's be frank about that. Now, there was a consequence to doing it. But then again, that's because the country had been fed on the principle that the government is basically going to take care of us. We are in exactly the same situation again. As much as the situational, if you want, niceties, right? The facts may have changed. The argument is still the same. Subsidies and transfers account for 25 to 27% of the budget, right? It doesn't give you room for much. And the reality is that we have trouble in terms of determining what's the total size of our income, right? And where's the next going to come from? The PNM has admitted that. The Minister of Finance has said it at least 3 times, right? 25 and 26 are difficult years. 27 is going to be the golden year. What's going to happen in 2027? Well, Lauren Manatee comes on stream. Well, we had Angeline and Jupiter come on stream. It didn't provide us with gold. The circumstances are completely different. So nobody knows what's going to take place in 2027. In those circumstances, you have to have a firm grasp on the policy position that you want to adopt and the communications that you want to send through. You want a unified and organized team behind the ideas you are going to present in the next election.
Well, Mr. Brown, you've put some perspective. You had me thinking in my head because you said something very critical, which is the executive team that surrounds the prime minister, and the majority of those members in the executive team, which the higher echelons of the party, seem to be very loyal to the prime minister. You said something as well that's important.
The prime minister is powerful. He is in the chair, right?
Straight.
When he gives up his power, they're going to be loyal to him outside and he have no power?
You talk about
no.
So then, so Mr. Imbert is one of the deputy political leaders of the party.
Yes.
And therefore, Mr. Imbert is also in play as a potential replacement for Dr. Rowley.
But he might be. I mean, technically he is. I think the reality of that is you think that if they put Mr. Imbert to lead the party, they will win the election?
No.
So
that's
also already decided. He remains deputy political leader.
So you have the others. So Mr. Sinanan is a deputy political, not a member of the House.
So
you have Gatsby Dolly, who is a deputy political leader, who is a member of the House.
Okay.
Who is your fourth one? I think it's
He gave Foster Cummins as an example as General
Secretary.
General Secretary.
He's not what you want. I can't remember who the it doesn't really matter who the deputy political leaders are, you know. That is useful.
Then you have the chairman, who you have the chairman of your party, of the party, I should say. You have Mrs. Robinson Regis there, and then as Keaton rightfully said, you have Mr. Foster Cummings. That's a very small cadre of people who sitting at the top of the executive branch there. that a potential prime ministerial
You
political
left
leader
out a few
candidate?
people. Let's put it. They will have some. They have some what you call it. Gatsby Dolly is new to the situation. May have some credibility. I'm not certain enough credibility to lead. So take that off. But she is in a safe seat.
Right.
Although it wasn't safe in 1986.
Correct.
No seat was safe in 1986. Right. So the PNR has to be very careful here. Right?
You have.
So you have what you call it. You have a couple faces that you could call on immediately. You put what you call. We know that the man who the prime minister wants in position is Stuart Young.
Do you think that's plausible?
You have Stuart Young. Well, of course it's plausible. He's already put it on the table, so it's an option. Right? So he's an option. You can't take him out because prime minister put him on the table. He's an option. Right? Penny is also an option.
Yeah.
Right? You can't take her out. If you want to take Diane Gatsby Dolly, you could put her in. Right? But she would be a weak option.
Yeah.
Right? She hasn't led she's said to be one of the people who, she's said to have ideas and what stuff that she wants to do, but she hasn't yet proven herself and hasn't taken it. They probably have one or two little dark horses in the race. Right? Foster Cummins, by definition, as General Secretary, probably has control of the constituencies. He probably has the biggest option there, but not necessarily the best candidate.
And then you have one that's sitting on the outside in the Senate who is probably the best candidate that may or may not get a seat.
The Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs?
The Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
But he cannot be considered at this time. Right? That is unfortunately the position. So the best that the party could come up to do is, one, either decide on a political leader, or two, let the General Council decide on an interim political leader. If they whoever is leading the party into the general election, if he doesn't win, he's gone. He or she is gone, right? And you will pick a political leader from what you have left. That's
by your rationale and my objectivity as narrowing this down, Mr. Brown. It comes down, seems to come down to a fight between really and truly two people. But it all depends on the operations and of the political machinery within the party to make the decision. So we could possibly be looking, and fellas, I said this earlier, three people, Stuart versus Penny versus Foster, and see where we go.
Right. So
okay, I just call it.
So you have narrowed the field to two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just accept that. Let's accept that. Right? Let's just accept that he narrowed the field to two. And the field will turn out to be, let's just say, that Foster stays in the background and you have an option between Penny and Stuart. How are you deciding it?
The vote of the party?
And how is the vote of the party through what mechanism? Through the General Council or through an annual convention?
Annual convention.
Good. All right. A special convention can be annual.
Yeah, a special annual.
Yeah. Special convention.
Special convention.
They only have one item on that agenda.
Election of the political leader.
That's it. Well, so I see two mechanisms. The General Council could make an interim decision, in which case there will be, I would say, is not the best decision, is not the best way to handle it, but it could handle it. Now remember, right, at the end of the day, after the special convention, after the General Council, the real test is the elections. Right? Whoever is in the leadership chair, right, if they fail, depending upon how that election goes, right, their term in office could be very, very short.
But I do believe that if it's a Penny versus the UNC, the PNM stands the best chance.
I'm not going to watch it call it. I'm not going to lay out the horses in the race at this stage of the game.
Well, tell you what, Mr.
Brown, I'm going to play the what you call it. Well, you know, Keaton, you tell me you're coming to talk to me. I didn't realize you're putting me in a debate.
Well, I didn't realize this is what
they
it
didn't
led
plan
to. It wasn't planned at all, Mr. Brown. It wasn't.
Well,
but I will ask you, though, Mr. Brown. I will ask you. Should the question arise, are you willing to play a role in any leadership position, to actually leave Trinidad in whether it be an election or whether it be in a government position, Senator, whatever the case may be, given your expertise, are you still willing to enter the political arena?
Into the political arena. I'm running a business school.
No, I understand that, and I know. Given your current position, I'm putting you in a. But I'm asking whether or not.
First of all, that's conjecture. We don't know that was going to happen or anything else going to happen along those lines. All right. I mean, I came into political office by virtue of being a conscript. Right. I had told the Prime Minister I was not prepared to serve, and the Prime Minister went ahead and made an announcement which made me a minister. And I found myself in a very compromising situation and therefore became a minister. All right. And I think I did a fair amount of work whilst I was there. Right? Being a minister is a difficult job. Right? It takes a lot of time to get a little bit done. Right? So I mean, these are 17-hour days. And quite frankly, most of the time you're not handling your priorities. You're responding to the detritus of management. You gotta have this meeting here, that meeting here, you're running in all directions. I would like to think that I would have to be more focused in my approach in terms of what would happen and how it would run. I have lived my life as I've been an executive manager, CEO for quite a few of the last number of years. Certainly the last 30 years of my life, I've been in the position of CEO, general managing director. Right? So I have a fairly clear idea of what has to happen in those positions. Not always consistent with being in the political arena. Right? So I'm quite comfortable as the CEO. I have a role, I have a responsibility here to the business school. Right? The business school is available to assist the government in whatever ways are required. And that's how I will approach it.
Well, I thank you for that response, Mr. I don't know, stressing the point that Mr. Brown is running a business school, but I thank you very much for that response, Mr. Brown. And I want to thank you for joining us on the program this morning, again, for the extended conversation. Initially, it was supposed to be Mr. Brown and I, but I think, Mr. Brown, you can say that this conversation was a lot more constructive. So I thank you very much for your time and your willingness to participate. We did put you in a compromising position, but you handled it well. Thank you.
Well, I hope that I was able to bring a certain degree of, how shall we call it, clarity to the situation. And
you brought a lot of clarity.
Just to repeat, I don't think that the Prime Minister has more than 30 days. If he goes past those 30 days, then I'll have to doubt his sincerity. I put it very mildly by saying it that way. All right. But certainly in the country, if you make a decision, you must go with it. And we must put the mechanisms in position to allow the country to continue to go about its business. Don't muck about on this.
I think in 30 days' time, there would be cause to replay this segment so that this point could be concretized. But Mr. Brown, thank you very much for joining us once more on the program. Thank you for your time. And of course, really, you have brought a sense of clarity, particularly as it relates to the PNM's constitution and the instruments at hand in respect to the leadership race. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All the very best. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break here on the program. When we return, we are going to open up the phone lines. Dr. Sheen Mohammed is with us. Sean Michael Small is with us. And of course, Sean and I are co-hosting this morning. We're going to get your name in the credits, buddy. Don't worry, we're working on it. But ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
But I will not be offering myself, as I just said. And I'll say something else. Before the end of the legal limits of this term, I will resign this office and go off to my family.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at community hospital of Seventh-day Adventists, and we are committed to making good private health care affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventists,
where good private health care is affordable.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, Meinl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
One of the things that they will be told is that I will not be offering myself again to represent anyone, either in Trinidad or in Tobago. 45 years is a long time. And I would like at this time to say thank you appropriately along the way to all those who have supported my effort and to have benefited from, I hope, I would have positively impacted this country somewhere, sometime. As we settle Tobago screening tomorrow, I continue to be the political leader of the PNM. We will call for nominations in the other seats where I represent the people of Diego Martin West, who have supported me resolutely from 1991 to now. And I will thank them appropriately and ensure that they are not left adrift. But I will not be offering myself, as I just said, And I'll say something else. Before the end of the legal limits of this term, I will resign this office and go off to my family. Thank you all very much, and see you again sometime soon.
Again, I'm still hearing the wows in the background following the Prime Minister's remarks and walking off from the podium last week Friday. But ladies and gentlemen, we've said a lot this morning. Dr. Sheen Mohammed joins Sean and I, and now is the opportunity for you to have your say. You can call in and join us on the program this morning. Join the conversation. The telephone lines are open. The numbers are on your screen. And you can share with us your thoughts and opinions, or even ask your questions, because as I said, Dr. Shimoe is with us. Gentlemen, just to bring up another issue as it relates to leadership, looking at what's happening in Canada, something that Dr. Mohammed mentioned this morning during his initial contribution to the program, focusing on Justin Trudeau in Canada. It seems as though they're on the verge of collapse. Justin Trudeau could resign any day now. Dr. Mohammed.
And trigger an election and see the Conservative Party win. And Pierre Poilievre, who has been showing very strong, he's been getting very strong support over the last 2 to 3 years, could emerge, very well emerge as the Prime Minister of Canada at the conclusion of the next general election in Canada. And
Well,
that would signal that would usher in another era of conservative rule in Canadian politics. So yeah,
the rise of the right wing across the world. That's a conversation to be have another day. But we do have our first caller on the line with us from Davide. Good morning, caller, and welcome to Talking Prime.
Hello, morning.
Hello, good morning.
Pleasant morning, Peter and Sean.
I think the phone lines are working. What's going on? Good morning, caller.
Yeah, morning. You hear me?
Yeah. We can hear you. Good morning, sir. Happy New Year. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, many happy returns. I must congratulate you all this morning for an excellent program. Both professionals answered a lot of questions that the normal layman on the street or even educators were not sure as to how it's going. And I must thank Dr. Mohammed too, and someone I have a lot of respect for. My question, though, is you'll handle the macro situation. There's a lot of micro problems within the constituencies. So I don't know if Dr. Mohammed can spend a little time, especially the constituency where my beloved MP was tragically lost alive. And I don't know if he has that level of information with respect what is happening in that constituency and a few other constituencies too, that persons who don't even listen to this program are not sure as to the future of the party. But I would just like to hear Dr. Mohammed's point on what should be happening at the micro end with respect to persons who are members of General Council. What sort of action should be taken in the constituencies, even as low as the party groups, with respect to the PNM actually moving forward and a viable contest for the 2025 elections. Excellent program again. I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you, caller. Dr. Mohammed, the floor is yours.
So immediately when we think about Davide O'Meara, they did say that the party did indicate that there would be a caretaker. And I gather that at the party level and at the constituency level, they will kind of coalesce a leadership team to really take care of the constituency until they get a new nominee and they seek nominations. I believe they're yet to reopen nominations for the Davide O'Meara seat. And in lieu of that too, there would be councillors, maybe the chairman of the Tunapuna Piaka Regional Corporation, including the mayor of Arima. They would all come together because they all belong to the same party to give the support that is needed to the constituents of Davide O'Meara until they open nominations for the constituency once again. So in that regard, The people and the executive and the party groups within WMERA are going to be the ones charged with the responsibility of looking at a new candidate and new nominations for someone who they believe can fill the large shoes left by the void of Lisa Morris Julian. So that's what the responsibility of the party groups within the constituency should be doing. Even by all now, start seeking out who is the appropriate and who they believe would represent the party, the constituents of WMERA effectively at the parliamentary level.
It's interesting too because now the party as a whole, as well as the party groups, now have to convene to screen for that seat one more time. One, I think it was it a week
before
her
yeah.
passing? Yeah, she was confirmed as the candidate for WMERA in the upcoming general election. So, in the instance of trying to find who is most suitable to be caretaker at this point, I don't know if there's a lot of time to even decide who's going to be caretaker. It's now a matter of who's going to be the next candidate.
Yeah, it would be well for now in the current instance as in the immediate present. There would have been persons who, the councillors are the ones, the first go-to people, right? The councillors are the persons that would be the ones who would be securing the interests of of constituents and from their different burgesses. But I've just mapped out while we were on the break. I was mapping out this 30 days hypothetically from Mr. Brown, and I'm wrapping my head around the thought that he initially said that the political leadership of the party is tied to the prime ministership, and that's something that theoretically I can understand, but I don't think, in rational thinking, I wonder if Dr. Rowley is even considering that, once he relinquishes the title of prime ministership, it's as if political leader becomes null and void automatically, It would be interesting, though, and Mr. Brown giving us the Mr. Manning scenario where Foster Cummings got up and said whatever. I would be really interested to know who has the gusto to get up outside of Jennifer Baptiste Primus. Who has the gusto to get up and tell the Prime Minister?
I'm still waiting for Rob LeHunt to actually make his contribution.
He's silent, right?
Where's Robert LeHunt in all this? Where is Robert LeHunt?
The thing is, there's a lot of parallels between Mr. Manning's last days, weeks, months, and the last few months of this administration, down to Mr. Elias complaining about Southeast Asian contractors and getting government contracts in a manner that may or may not be unfair, right? Down to that, we have the parallels. So, I mean, if Foster could do it for one, Foster could do it for another, because I think at the end of the day, and I tried to say before, and Mr. Brown, maybe Mr. Brown and Dr. Mohammed might have properly framed it. Once he is no longer prime minister, what power could he really have? That's the trick. That's why I think he refrained from making his position definitive. Unfortunately, you lose a colleague in a tragedy. You lose a brother. You're 78. You've had COVID 4 to 5 times. Are you going to make it 5 more years and then retire? So who are you fooling, right? Why do you want to put yourself through that again? You already have to struggle through COVID. Now you have to deal with the aftermath of our gas reserves going down. I have no issue with Dr. Rowley retiring. I think Mr. Brown said something that I did not consider until he said it, and I believe it to be true. Now, what Mr. Brown said is not hard and fast rules that it must be so. I think basically what he's saying is it should be so. It should be as soon as possible.
Ought to be so.
It ought to be so. As soon as possible, the leadership position needs to be fixed within the PNM so they could get ready for the next general election, because you have limited time. You have limited time, and you have to deal with not having Lisa Morris Julian, which is, to some extent, that's a body that you were counting on being there that's no longer there.
So, you said there are many parallels. I'm curious to know, and you may think it's a silly question, but do parallel lines ever meet? Do parallel lines ever
Not
meet?
always. No, to be honest with you, from our discussion this morning, in politics, it's very. I mean, politics is about the art of negotiating. When Mr. Pandey talked about the art of words, he didn't mean physical words. It meant the ability to speak, the parley, the ability to negotiate, the ability to rationalize. If Mr. Brown is saying 30 days from the 3rd of February to the January, that puts us to the 3rd of February. I don't think the PNM is ready. I don't think the Prime Minister is ready by the 3rd of February. We're already on the
Yeah, but
6th of
you're making the assumption on the fact that this announcement was only made on Friday. That announcement was only made on Friday to the public. We don't know what's been going on behind closed doors, especially since the delaying of the position of political leadership in the last election. That was delayed and it was justified.
But
So it's
I'll
quite
tell you
possible
this
since
though.
then this has been in the works.
If the Bacchanal, let's say the Bacchanal, if the Bacchanal was raging since then, I think that we would have gotten a whim or a hint of it that this is what the plan was, because somebody was not going to be happy and had nothing to lose and would have said something. I think he did take the country by surprise in terms of the majority of persons, even within the government, by surprise by what he said on Friday. I do believe that they are his closest confidants, and obviously Mr. Manning had his closest confidants as well. I think Dr. Rowley's closest confidants, which might only be about 2 or 3 persons, really and truly knew that he might have been coming with this as a possible announcement. Taken into consideration, he probably he ebb and weave in terms of whether he should have said it on Friday evening or left it to after these 2 days that they in Tobago chilling and doing whatever. But you see, Rowley is a calculated man. He's many things, but he's also calculated. And he's going to want to
Very good strategist, I would say.
Yeah, and he did say there's going to be no vacuum and it's going to be seamless. Now, Mr. Brown, by the process of elimination, kind of, sort of, and I don't want to, I'm saying kind of, sort of, brought it down to a fight between two people. Those 2 persons are not far-fetched possibilities of a fight between Stuart versus Penny. If Penny wins the election of political leader, I think he's handed her a team that she may not necessarily have had a choice in formulating. But then again, there's another aspect. You're only a candidate, you're only confirmed as a candidate up until nomination day. So then a new political leader could change up the apple cart as well. But that's not normal for the PNM. So this thing now becomes really technical, and it really comes down to personalities. And remember when I talked about conglomerating and building blocks, creating those blocks of persons to coalesce behind a person? I don't know if Foster is going to give up an opportunity to rise to political leadership if it's literally in front of him. I don't know.
Here's the thing,
you said confidence. It could be 2 or 3 persons, and I was thinking it could be 1 person in 2 or 3 positions. But whoever that individual might be, i.e. Stuart Young. But anyway, Sean, as you were saying.
No, well, here's the thing. It's not just. So there's multiple dimensions to this. There is the individuals involved. Who has the ambition to be prime minister and who's going to fight for it? What support do they have? Then, of course, the support could come from, yes, the members of the party, the members of each constituency, etc., etc. But then there's also the finances. And one of the things that was within Stuart Young's favor was, from what I heard, he was considered to be safe by the finances. That's one way to put it, right? Who will the financiers? Who will the big money supporters? Who will those that wield unofficial power within the party? Because there are people like that in every party. Let's be real, right? Unless you're a new party that hasn't established yourself. right? Let's be real. So, and at the end of the day, to some extent, look, whether it's done ethically or unethically, they are supporters of the party, and they are major important supporters of the party, so their opinion is important to the party. Who are they
Sean,
going
that's an excellent point. No, it's a very good point that you've made there. It's a very good point that you've raised. But my question would be in response to that is, does the majority of finances equate to an election win? Because at the end of the day, you can pump your money into the party, you can pump your money behind a candidate. If that candidate is unsuccessful in a general election, given the fact that those who support the party do not see favor with them, what does that mean for finances? So
Listen, just look
you're
at him.
correct in what you're saying, but does that equate to a general election win?
This is why, this is another reason, just like Mr. Brown said, look, you can't have your deals up in the air. Part of your deals is your party financing, right?
You have to also take into consideration, fellas, that we are not operating in a bubble here with just the PNM. The PNM is going to pivot itself against its prospects against the UNC. The UNC has a role in this thing too. Who becomes and who emerges as the next political leader of the PNM is also determined by what the framework and what the personalities and what the lineup of the UNC looks like. So if it is that it seems as though the harder fight would be a Stewart versus Prasad Bissessa with a strong and an exceptionally strong grouping of candidates, then you never know. So what is the gamble that the PNM is willing to take? Go with the young and face a backlash? Go with the Beckles and guarantee a possibility of a whole country saying, oh my God, yeah, we're going with this? Because let's be real, Penny Beckles has pristine reputation. She has crossover appeal. The lady is seen as approachable. The lady is seen as stable in terms of her leadership, ability to lead and that kind of thing. Just by the way she speaks, it's a different approach. So a Penny versus Kamla Prasad Bissessa is almost a foregone conclusion. Huh?
Here's the thing. She's also a highly experienced member of this administration that has successfully kept herself from being associated with a lot of the baggage of the decisions of this administration.
And as I told you, she served in all three capacities: MP, senator, and diplomat. So the lady knows it, right? She has done it. Emery has served in those three roles. Camille has served in those three roles. Now, as I said earlier, and I stand by that, I don't believe that Camille has leadership aspirations at this stage of the game, right? She's really and truly, when you look at her, her role is to mentor and coach and prepare younger people for high office.
Will she be one of the people? Because you're saying that the party has to do what's best for the party given whatever the state the UNC is in. My concern is too many of the people at the top will be looking out for numero uno, and perhaps maybe Camille might be one of those who would be the institution, the prime minister, the president there that's gonna like, hold on, my eye is on the overall picture. I'm still on the ball. I'm not worried about individual accolades and achievements. And I mean, right now though, Dr. Mohammed, you have to admit that's generally what we've been seeing, down to the position of Commissioner of Police, right? As much as the Prime Minister said he doesn't see people, he sees too much me and not about us. I'm sorry, I see too much people making the me decision and not the us decision. So I'm not too sure. Once Dr. Rowley goes, I don't know who keeps the party from
collapsing or imploding on itself.
Maybe not totally collapsing, but it's a fight that will disregard.
I don't think you'll ever see the PNM collapsing. That's one thing I will say.
No.
But I can see a fight that disregards overall interests, because to some extent, and I do believe politicians don't see the world as how we see it, they're not going to see the risk. To them, it's like, well, the PNM is the PNM, and the PNM will beat this version of the UNC. It doesn't matter who's in charge. That's the mindset. Whether it's arrogance or confidence, I leave that up to you. And not everybody will be that way. So that's the thing. There's Camille. I don't know if Amory Brown is going to take a back seat this time, I mean, maybe he will. That would be the smarter play.
Well, according to what Mr. Brown has said, yes, Emery doesn't have a chance in this instance because he doesn't hold a seat, and because he doesn't
of
hold
course, yes,
right. So he doesn't hold a seat, and
But could he be a potential candidate for Digger Martin West?
he could be a potential candidate for any of the Digger
as
Martin's
Karen pointed out, him saying the constituency did not contact him doesn't really mean that much because again, as you also implied, not necessarily directly, earlier on in this show.
No, exactly. You could say that I was not informed or I didn't receive. Listen, when those people and let's be real, the party groups do have a real say, and the constituency executives do have a real say in the PNM structure. So really and truly, if Diego Martin, let's say Central, or Diego Martin, let's say Diego Martin Central says we don't want no Brega, we want Amory because we've had him before and he was good to us. And he's now, I mean, let's be real. Amory Brown has been one of the most outstanding ministers in this administration. He's been a flag bearer of this administration. People can say what the hell they want. The truth is, the man has done his job impeccably as Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. But he doesn't have a seat. And that puts him in a real...
So here's the next question. He doesn't have a seat, right? But one way or the other, that criteria could change.
Correct.
Who has seats by the midpoint, by the end of 2025, could look very different to who has seats now. So do you think it's possible we're potentially looking at two, not one, but two fights? The fight before the election, and then the fight in the internal election that's slated to happen next year.
If the PNM wins the general election, that determines a lot. Because you don't normally they won't challenge a political leader while in government.
Who is the prime minister?
Right? Yeah, you won't do that. So it goes for the UNC as well. You don't challenge the political leader who is the prime minister while in office. So their best bet would be if the PNM loses. Now, the PNM loses based on the opposition. Again, one depends on the other, right? What Mrs. Bissessa choose to do going forward? Because at the end of the day, Mr. Brown has me. If Mr. Brown or what he said today has me back on my drawing board, making notes, right? And putting this thing down to a timeline, because a new prime minister needs time to kind of settle down into the office and get the country acclimatized to the leadership
are you speaking of the interim before the election, assuming that he retires before calling the election?
But that's what the man said. He going to do.
Because to some extent, I hate to say this, and maybe this is bad. We do have a state of emergency and a crime problem, right? So that would also be the head of the National Security Council, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more important, at least for the PNM, that whoever this interim person is, concentrate more on the upcoming election. And to some extent, does the country want an interim person making policy? He's a caretaker when it comes to government. You won't have a mandate to make any big sweeping legislative changes or have a big sweeping legislative agenda. That's there's a reason why Biden didn't have a lot on his plate.
Yeah, okay, but before we go back to US politics, I just want to come back to the point that you were making earlier, because exactly what you were saying is also what Mariana Brown indicated on the program about how this could actually be a bit disastrous in respect to policy decision making and even decisions as it relates to investment. But I want to revisit the point of Penny Beckles for a moment. Yes, Dr. Moore, you said it's a foregone conclusion if Penny Beckles was to lead the PNM versus Kama Pusabi-Sessa. Okay, I'm curious to know whether or not she has won over the minds of the people, in the sense that she has remained, in my opinion, and following all the news, one of the most silent of MPs and one of the most silent of government ministers. And that is something that is quite important. She has not necessarily had the public relations, good or bad, the mere fact is public relations, as has other MPs and ministers. And could that be critical
Let
in
me
deciding
ask you-
who the next political leader is.
Let me ask you something. I agree. That could have also been a strategy, and a very good one too. Right? We have to figure out in our head, and only someone who sits inside the cabinet will know this. So, one, what would be interesting to know is where does Penny Beckles sit in the cabinet? In which seat? And how does she position herself in the cabinet?
Like how close to the Prime Minister?
Yes, within where in that around that oval table does she sit? That's one. Two, her silence is very much a strategy. I think it would be a good strategy. But let me ask you another question, really and truly. Does Penny Beckles need a PR team? Penny Beckles, up to this moment, has not said a single word to the media to indicate that she's interested in it. What she did say yesterday is that one has to take into consideration that at one point in time she did challenge. That's like a nice little precursor.
Yeah, she reminded people.
That's a teaser, right? That's a nice teaser in this movie, and it's an excellent teaser. Just to give to the country that I just reminded you all. I mean, I don't know if I'm interested yet, but I just want to let you all know there's a point in time that I did challenge, right? And in other words, in challenging, there was a consequence to that. And I'm just happy, in her words, I'm just happy to have been given the opportunity by Dr. Rowley to serve my constituency and to serve as minister and to once again return to my constituents in the upcoming general election. First up, we have thrown her name into the ring. She hasn't done that. So she didn't need a PR team to tell her to push her forward. And from a political science perspective, we're looking at every single possible candidate for prime minister.
Well, consider this though. I mean, she was an ambassador in Keith Rowley's first term.
Correct.
She was an ambassador, I mean, for a reason.
Correct.
So here's the interesting part now. Some of the other people involved in that decision, if she is political leader, she'll be their boss.
Correct.
I don't know if those people want her to be political leader while they're still there.
Correct.
And that's one of the main reasons why I kind of look at this possibility. It's not impossible. Barack Obama came out of nowhere because he kind of had some very great victories and the public was supporting him. And if she has the public support, it might be very hard not to go with her, because then they run the risk of the people not voting for them out of anger. Which,
that's also on the premise, as Mr. Brown himself said, that the party goes to a special general convention, right? If it goes to a special general convention, then it's open door and open opportunity for every single member of the PNM to have a vote. Well, who's there? But if it goes to the general council, I think Dr. Rowley, I don't know. Mr. Brown is saying that, the man doesn't have power. He wouldn't behave in the way he does or has, and he wouldn't say certain things if he didn't do the maths and if he didn't do the calculations.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think that he did the calculations and he didn't necessarily like where it was going, so he kind of hedged his bets. He didn't commit, and then his family faced a tragedy, and I think he had the all too practical reality of, listen, at some point, this is a you problem. This is not going to be a me problem. So I need to stop hurting myself to deal with your problem, right? You're not going to figure life without me, one way or the other, sooner or later. So let's do it this way, because I would prefer sooner. I have no problem with that. And as a private citizen, Sean Michael Small also prefers, let's try and settle as much of this as possible before the election, as opposed to what we were potentially facing with, will political leaders go up for election and then, at least with the PNM, potentially changes it, or has their internal election the year after that could change it? That seems a little messy to me, but it is what it is, right? Luckily, at least in PNM, we are probably going to avoid that.
Gentlemen, if I may, we have reached that 9:30 mark. And I think it is given the phone calls this morning. I know it's the first day back out to it for most people, and of course for students, it's the first day back out to school. So things are a bit jumbled this morning. So at this point, I'm actually going to thank
And a state of
everyone for their
emergency.
contribution. Yeah, well, state of emergency as well. In fact, one chamber has indicated that businesses are operating like we're already under a curfew. So that is something to digest as well.
Some businesses were operating as though they were under curfew, depending on what area, including areas in Port of Spain,
True.
long before. So Maraval, right? We're not talking about East Port of Spain. We're not talking about by Citygate. We're talking about Maraval, Woodbrook, Diego Martin. So the state of emergency is like a formality to try and just put a cherry on top.
I think Sean's word we can take for credit, given that he's visited almost every single restaurant, at least within the Mile Port of
I
Spain
have a
area.
very limited.
Anyway.
Wow. Wow.
Sean
Well,
Michael Small, thank you
I know
very
who I'm not
much.
inviting next time, Keaton.
Thank you very much for the early morning shift. It's 1 week apart, but two programs in a row. Well done to you, and of course, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program this morning. Thank you very much for your analysis, gentlemen.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun. We got a
It was
different
fun indeed.
perspective. You all have
it's going to be an exciting year, isn't it?
I think if there's one thing people should take away from this show, just the kind of, I will assume to speak a little bit for Dr. Mohammed, it's not about I want X or Y party to win. It's about I want parties to do better. Because if they do better, then we get a better result.
That's
and if
correct.
both, even if one party doesn't hold up its end of the bargain, it's only a matter of time for the other one to slip as well.
Correct.
Right? So, people, we need to expect more from our politicians. It starts with the voters.
I was about to say, we need to expect more from our politicians. We also need to expect better of ourselves and expect more from ourselves. I mean, remember our civic duties and the responsibilities that we have as citizens. It's not just that
I think we need to
politicians.
stop being pawns for the propaganda. And I think if people were to do some research, Keaton, you know how I feel about people reading more and doing more research. I think they would be able to be more informed and have more rational and objective thinking from an academic and an educational perspective. I think our country is too many people are relying on propaganda and hearsay and bacchanal, which then informs poor decisions as to how they vote or not vote.
Don't get your news from social media.
Correct.
I know very much.
I
know very much of Dr. Mohammed's wanting for people to read more and do more research, having been told by him on a number of occasions previously in a different capacity. So, Dr. Mohammed, thanks very much for your time once more. So, Michael Small, I think that lesson is one that you can take heading into 2025 as well, my friend. It's something that we all need to read a bit more. We all need to read a bit more and do a lot more research.
I read. I know big words.
Listen to YouTube videos with the subtitles on.
I could spell
YouTube videos with the subtitles on is not reading.
I could spell those. Those are big words, Keaton.
Sean, in 2025, don't be like Fitzgerald Hines. Big words and very little.
Hold on. You was gonna say don't be like Keaton.
I don't know if you was gonna say don't be like Keith. I don't know, like Keith. I don't know.
Listen. I promise you.
It's a bit blurry, isn't it?
I promise you. I have one accent, right? I promise you.
That's good, Sean Michael Small, and you keep it that way, my friend. Don't get all confused and jumble up, especially when it comes to some words. But we all have some more reading and research to do, ladies and gentlemen. We have a year ahead of us that can be exciting. Don't let it be defeating. The year has started off, and though in the circumstances, let's make it a great year for ourselves. So this is me thanking Sean Michael Small and Dr. Oman once more. And from my multiple accents and my multiple Englishes and my multiple sub-languages, bye-bye. We'll see you again soon.
WESN. Between the Bank and the Gutter, a novel about street dwellers in Port of Spain. This is a book to make you both laugh and cry. Above all, it takes you to that special space that only street dwellers know. In this moving and riveting human interest story, Harry journeys from insanity to sanity while living on the streets of Port of Spain. Now available at Metropolitan Books, 12 Aripita Avenue, Woodbrook. Paper-based bookshop, 14 Alcazar Street, Woodbrook. WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. And the home store branches located at Barrataria, Shogunas, and Eastgates Mall. Autographed copies